"What does fellow Taoist mean?" The silver silhouette's voice suddenly grew cold. When the other cultivators saw this, they all revealed alarm. Han Li faintly smiled, and with a hand still holding the box down, he slapped his storage pouch and took out another jade box. The silver silhouette unconsciously received the box and annoyedly said, "I will only trade for a devil essence diamond. I have no interest in anything else." "You should take a look at what's inside first. There's no harm in that," Han Li said with a deep tone. The silver silhouette hesitantly opened the box and took a quick glance before letting out a gasp of surprise. "Good, the elemental jade is yours," the silver silhouette cheerfully said. She had only opened the box halfway before carefully putting the box away and returning to the crowd. All the cultivators around them were left completely baffled. They hadn't caught sight of what was contained in the third jade box Han Li had taken out, but it was enough to get the woman to agree to the exchange. Of course, there were a few people that guessed that it was a third devil essence diamond, but it was already shocking for a single person to possess two of them, let alone a third. Since it was so unlikely, most people had guessed Han Li took out a great treasure to tempt the woman. At that moment, the gazes in the crowd were looking at Han Li with various emotions ranging from envy to hostility. Han Li paid no attention to this and took another glance at the silver silhouette and unconsciously frowned. Her figure gave him a rather familiar impression. Could it be her? A shocking thought suddenly crossed Han Li's mind. Although the voice wasn't the same, cultivators of their stage could change their voice with ease. With that thought, Han Li used his bright sight spirit eyes to look at her. Although he wouldn't be able to completely see through the mist of light, it would allow him make out a more concrete outline. As a result, he wore an odd expression. This woman did appear to be the endless sky saintess, but because of their circumstances, she hadn't discovered his identity and carried off with the devil essence diamond in delight. The last of the materials he toiled to collect was actually in the hands of a hated enemy. Han Li felt at a loss of whether he should laugh or cry at this rather ridiculous affair. While his heart was assailed by this indescribable feeling, he quickly put away the auric essence and elemental jade he had acquired and returned to his seat. He no longer paid further attention to anything as he was able to accomplish his objective, and managed to gain a large piece of auric essence without much trouble as well, much to his satisfaction. This chunk would be enough for him to temper most of his remaining swords. Another 40-some-odd cultivators later went on stage to trade their items, but none of them revealed anything as rare as the elemental jade and devil essence diamonds. As such, most attendees were bored with the display, and matters were proceeded in a hurry. Eventually, the last trader had finished and returned to their seat. The white silhouette then clapped his hands twice and said, "Since fellow Taoists had finished their trades, we will begin the auction for the final treasure of this meeting, an item that is truly a marvel to behold." With that said, two cultivators appeared at the entrance of the hall. Surprisingly, the two hadn't placed the concealment talismans on their body and were revealing their true appearance. The crowd became restless and puzzled as most of them had recognized the two. They were an old man with a black hand at early nascent soul cultivation, and a middle-aged man with a square face at mid-nascent soul cultivation, the elders of the Imperial Yi clan that commonly interacted with outsiders. Only a few cultivators seemed to understand what was happening. They had received information of the treasure that would appear in the trade meet, and their spirits were greatly roused. At that moment, the middle-aged man approached the table at the center of the hall and nodded towards the white silhouette. He turned around to face the crowd and slowly said, "There will be no need for introductions, so I'll keep it short. This grand treasure is something that our Yi clan had spent much effort creating. It had taken us over 100 years, and we've only recently finished it. However, there have been several sects close to the Yi clan that were looking to purchase this item, but we dare not to offend any of them. As we are helpless, we have decided to auction it as the last item of the trade meet. Let's see if any fellow Taoist has the opportunity to acquire this grand treasure." With that said, he turned to the old man and gave him a nod. The old man took out a foot-long box and gritted his teeth before reluctantly handing it over to the white silhouette. The white silhouette chuckled and said, "Since that is done, I won't be wasting my breath either. I'll first show everyone the true appearance of this treasure." He then tossed the jade box into the air, and a fist-sized blinding yellow streak slowly floated out from it. As soon as it appeared, it seemed to fluctuate in size of its own accord and release faint hums. He then clasped his hands in an incantation gesture and struck it with several spell seals. After he pointed at it, he let out a soft shout, causing it to wildly flash and revolve in place before it revealed its true form, a yellow seal that was several inches large. The stamp appeared as smooth as jade, but from the fluctuating light on its surface, one could faintly see layers of gold and silver spell formations on top of it. Each time light flickered, it would display a different set of talisman characters, causing observers to feel greatly mystified upon further inspection. In addition, the stamp released a spiritual chi that was completely massive, yet steady and calm. When the spectators sensed this, they were deeply shocked. This treasure is called the mountain-crushing seal, an imitation of the ancient divine spirit treasure, the heaven-wielding seal. According to the Yi clan's tests, although it only displays a tenth of the original's power, it is more than enough to flatten any mountain. Even if a cultivator possesses great enough spiritual power to wield the entirety of its might, it will be possible to wield a third of the power of the heaven-wielding seal. However, this will heavily damage the treasure, so it'd be best to avoid doing this. As the white silhouette spoke, he controlled the mountain-crushing seal in front of him to continuously fluctuate in size and release an astonishing aura. Although this demonstration didn't fully display its might, it was enough to show that it was beyond ordinary. No matter their past knowledge, the seal had firmly captured their attention. When Han Li heard that it was a replica of a divine spirit treasure, he was also surprised. He had already spent a great effort to gather the materials needed to refine the Triflame fan. Now that a divine spirit treasure replica had appeared at the auction, Han Li felt particularly gloomy. It is a pity he didn't know much of divine spirit treasures. He wasn't sure how the Triflame fan would compare in strength to this mountain-crushing seal. As if guessing his thoughts, Monarch Soul Divergence said, "There is no need to worry. The mountain-crushing seal only displays a tenth of the original treasure's might. The Triflame fan I deducted from the Seven Flame fan should possess 2/5 of its original power. And as this person says, if exerted, it will be able to display half of the original treasure's might. Although both are attack-type treasures, the seal should be inferior to the fan in terms of might." Han Li nodded and muttered, "Yes, I've thought as much. I hope I'll be able to refine the Triflame fan soon. With that treasure in my hands, I reckon I'll have nothing to fear from late-nascent soul cultivators." Monarch Soul Divergence snorted and coldly chuckled. "This isn't the heavenly south. Do you think that your replica will be unique?" Senior means to say. "According to what I've discovered when I toured the Great Jinn, the High Zenith Sect, the Heavenly Devil Sect, and the Myriad Demon Valley all had replicas of divine spirit treasures. Myriad Demon Valley, in particular, had the most famous of the replicas, the Myriad Demon Banner. It is said that the flag has already reached the same level as its original, the Heaven Demon Banner, as a result of the many cultivator souls it had devoured. As for the other great sects, I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to refine 1 or 2 replicas of their own. How else would they be able to remain towering after all this time?" After some thought, Han Li conceded, "Since a noble clan like the Yi clan was capable of creating a divine spirit treasure replica, other great sects should have been able to do so as well." "There is no point in being dejected," Monarch Soul Divergence sourly said. "Although they may be replicas, they were refined from rare materials. I reckon that most of these materials are extinct in this world and were only gathered together over a long period of time. Besides, don't you have a genuine divine spirit treasure in your possession? If you are able to fully wield it, none would be able to stand against you in this world." When Han Li heard this, he wryly snickered. "As if that would be easy. It will only be a daydream unless I am able to reach deity transformation stage. But if I reach that level, I'll be able to reign over the mortal world without the heaven void cauldron in hand." Monarch Soul Divergence chuckled and said nothing else. The hall was filled with an overpowering silence after the introduction of the mountain-crushing seal. The white silhouette could read the pressure from the crowd and didn't delay any further with the explanation. After a light cough, he began to describe the conditions to acquire the seal. "The Yi clan has already prepared a list of the items it desires. Whoever is able to produce the most of these materials will be able to acquire this treasure. Of course, if the value of the highest trade is obviously insufficient, it will not be accepted. The final method of trade will be an auction with a minimum bid of 3 million spirit stones." When this was said, a majority of cultivators present became restless, but none had raised any objections. Although that number of spirit stones was most of the wealth that a mid-sized cultivator sect possessed, it truly was a low price for it. When the auction started, it was more than likely that the bids would reach several times the minimum. When Han Li heard the conditions of the trade, he felt a chill shake his heart as a strange thought came to mind. If he were to take out his last devil essence diamond and put it on auction, he could acquire a significant amount of spirit stones. However, it wasn't quite comparable. The most famous treasure of the Devil Dao, the Devil Dragon Blade, was something he had done a bit of research on. It appeared that only one of them was able to be refined, and this was during ancient times. It was said that some devil cultivators were able to kill deity transformation stage cultivators with the weapon, and its might was no inferior to a divine spirit treasure. Since the Devil Dragon Blade was a magic treasure, it had immense potential, but it couldn't be refined with only 1 or 2 devil essence diamonds. Even so, a devil cultivator could greatly increase their cultivation by absorbing the diamond's pure devilish chi, which caused its immense value. Just as these random thoughts appeared in his head, the old man took out a jade slip containing the list of materials and began to read them out loud. Although his voice was soft, everyone in the hall could clearly hear him. After this was said, Han Li grew indifferent and no longer had any intention of fighting over the treasure. It wasn't that he couldn't be tempted by the treasure, but that he was aware of his own limits. As a lone cultivator, how could he possibly compare to the vast wealth of the greatest sects of the Jin Empire? Even the entire fortune of a smaller sect couldn't hope to compete. After hearing out the list of items they wanted in exchange, Han Li became certain the Yi clan was willing to take out the mountain-crushing seal at this auction, because they taking advantage of being pressured by the various superpowers to sell the item. The old man hadn't uttered the name of materials as rare as elemental jade or auric essence, but since the requested items were both uncommon and essential, large sects would always keep a stockpile of them. It appears the Yi clan were planning to deal a striking blow to these sects. With that in mind, Han Li stood up and headed towards the teleportation formation of the hall. The action had aroused quite a bit of attention and bewilderment, as many cultivators had taken note of him after he produced 2 devil essence diamonds. Han Li paid little notice of this and continued on his way out, but just as he was about to enter the glowing formation, he heard the sound of a familiar voice. "Fellow Taoist Han, why are you leaving now?" Old man Fu had sent him a voice transmission. Han Li stopped and replied, "I've become a target of attention. It'd be best for me to depart before I attract problems. I still haven't forgotten about Brother Fu's affair. If you aren't in a hurry, how about we talk about it in a few years after I finish refining a treasure? My matter isn't urgent at all. However, Brother Han has taken quite the effort to conceal himself from me. I didn't have the slightest clue you possess something as precious as devil essence diamonds. It is no wonder the Yin sifting sect is pursuing you. Anyways, in 4 years' time, could you meet me in Nanjian Province's Keiyun Prefecture? At that time, I will have arranged for other fellow Taoists to meet me at Twin Scorpion Mountain. I guarantee that, although the matter will require some effort, you will most certainly be rewarded. 4 years, that will be enough time. I'll see you then." With that said, Han Li stepped into the formation and disappearing in a flash of white light. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, Han Li flew out from the underground trade meet, flying a circle in the air before heading east. A short moment after Han Li departed, several cultivators quietly departed from the trade meet as well, having more or less had the same thoughts about the mountain-crushing seal. Most, however, decided to remain behind. After all, there were to be even more rare materials, along with the fierce competition involved. After quickly flying 500 kilometers away, he passed by a nearby mountain and had heard a peculiar sword cry. Han Li's expression vastly changed, and he came to a sudden stop. He took a deep breath and sharply glanced around him. Tens of golden flying swords were simultaneously released to densely fly around him with great momentum. With blue light flashing from his eyes, he stared at an empty space and coldly said, "Your tracks have already been revealed. There is no point in hiding. Come out." You are truly clever, as expected of the cultivator who slew my main soul." Black light flashed from where Han Li was standing to reveal a youth with a similar appearance to himself. He also wore azure robes and had a calm expression, but a dim black-purple light shined from his eyes. When Han Li saw this person, he felt his heart drop despite having already anticipated this. "So it was you. Why have you come to find me?" After examining Han Li for a moment, he lazily said, "It seems you already know who I am. I didn't expect to find you so quickly. It seems my luck is quite good." Han Li emotionlessly said, "My 2 swords are in your possession. I'd have to be stupid to not know who you are." "That's right, your flying swords are right here." The elder devil's soul fragment raised his hand and revealed 2 small swords that were violently trembling. They were attempting to return to Han Li with all their might, but layers of black thread were firmly keeping them in place. Your flying swords possess quite a bit of sentience to take the initiative to warn you. Han Li's expression turned sullen. The elder devil mysteriously smiled and said, "To think, these swords were actually refined from the evil-slaying golden lightning bamboo. The others should be the same, revealing quite an unbelievable amount in total. It appears my main soul hadn't perished for nothing. Although I was able to avoid being consumed, with his death I will forever be unable to recover my complete cultivation. Should I thank you, or kill you?" Han Li paused before wearing a frigid smile. "Don't tell me that you were waiting here only to have a chat with me." The elder devil looked down at the two golden swords in his hand and said, "That's up to you to decide. So long as you tell me how you were able to acquire so much golden lightning bamboo, I may be willing to let you go. But I may also be willing to draw out the answer from your primal soul." When Han Li heard this, his bearing remained unchanged. He then narrowed his eyes and imposingly said, "Talking about killing me and actually doing so are two very different things. If I remembered correctly, you were heavily injured in the heavenly south. It's hard to believe you've fully recovered after a short amount of time. I will be comparing your abilities to that of the main soul. I originally thought you would speak when faced with death, but I guess not. So be it." Killing intent surged from the elder devil, and the black-purple light in his eyes glowed. Just as Han Li and the elder devil were about to clash, the devil's expression suddenly stirred, and he glanced behind him. Han Li also soon sensed something as well, and glanced in the same direction with a raised brow. Soon a blaze flashed from a distance, followed by a streak of light. When he saw how quickly it was traveling, along with the faint sounds of a storm, he was surprised. A fierce aura bled from the devil as he flew forward to meet the approaching light with an ominous glint in his eyes. In a mere moment, the streak closed the distance of over 10 kilometers, revealing a monk with disheveled hair. Heck had a stern expression on his face, with one hand holding a scarlet alms bowl and the other a meter-long green staff. When he saw the two, he was surprised to see that they had the same face. The monk looked at them both and smiled, asking, "May I ask which one is the fellow Taoist that emerged from the trade meet?" Han Li's expression stirred, and he silently glanced at him. The monk possessed mid-nascent soul cultivation and had unordinary treasures, so it came as no surprise that he would dare to follow him. However, Han Li was disinterested since he didn't know his intentions. As for the elder devil, when he saw the intruder, he looked to the sky with his hands behind his back and ignored him. The monk grew furious. Ever since he entered nascent soul stage and came into possession of his bloodfire bowl and coiling dragon staff, those of equivalent strength had all treated him with great courtesy. Now these two disregarded him, despite appearing to possess somewhat similar cultivation, and he couldn't help but hold an unsightly expression on his face. To make matters worse, their appearances were similar, so they appeared to be together. If he were to fight them, he couldn't predict the outcome despite his confidence. As such, he could only forcefully restrain himself as he began to plan how to best strike them down. But before he could conceive an approach, more lights shined from over the horizon. 3 various-colored streaks were flying together towards them. When the monk saw this, he was stunned. He was only able to chase Han Li after using an additional ability to increase his speed. Now, there were 3 unknown parties that were just a step behind. It appeared there would be some difficulty to claim the treasures for himself, but with these new arrivals, he wouldn't need to face these 2 cultivators alone. With that thought, the monk revealed a gloomy countenance and gave them a sinister glance. As if sensing the monk's ill intent, the elder devil suddenly focused his gaze on him and then looked at the incoming lights with impatience. "How troublesome. I originally believed that you would be the only bother. I didn't think that there were more people coming after you. Since that's the case, let's start off with him." After those cold words were said, the elder devil's body flashed with black light and rushed towards the monk. The monk inwardly shouted in alarm and instantly flipped the alms bowl, releasing a cloud of scarlet flame and forming a barrier around him. Then the dark green staff in his other hand transformed into an emerald flood dragon and charged forward to meet the streak of black light. With green mist trailing from the flood dragon's mouth, it fiercely swiped at the elder devil, but before the strike landed, the devil's body quivered with light and disappeared. Tapping his vast experience in battle, the monk instantly raised his hands to form an incantation gesture and released several green spell seals into the barrier of flame protecting him. The inferno surged and began to circle with astonishing momentum, turning into a green-red whirlwind that reached 100 meters tall. Still feeling ill at ease, The monk slapped his storage pouch to take out another protective treasure. But before he could, a black blip flashed 10 meters away from him, followed by two arms covered in black-purple light reaching out towards him. In that instant, the arms had already moved into the flame barrier without the slightest fear. Ah! The monk's heart trembled at the sight, and without another thought, he yelled, releasing a large golden mist from his mouth. It quickly condensed into a light barrier in front of him as his body blurred in an attempt to dodge away. A faint bang sounded out. Like paper, the golden barrier was split by the two devilish arms and made their way to the monk's dantian. After piercing clean through, the claws violently parted, rending the monk's body into two, splatting gore and blood into the air. A red nascent soul cried out and flew off on a golden sword, traveling over 60 meters away from its body. Just as the nascent soul glowed in golden light to perform another instantaneous movement, it was too late. A purple thread suddenly appeared behind it, followed by something piercing through its head. Its mind burned, and it let out a shriek as all its strength fled. Powerless, it was tightly wrapped by the purple thread and was brought back into the barrier of red flames. The three streaks of light had then arrived a kilometer away, and the cultivators within them were able to clearly see what had happened. The three felt fear overwhelm their hearts and immediately turned around, flying back with even greater speed. They were all early nascent soul cultivators, though they originally conspired to join hands together when they saw the famous monk Wickedfire viciously slain and had his nascent soul captured. They immediately turned to flee. They now knew their greed would only result in downfall and soon disappeared out of sight. Henley felt his breath turn cold when he saw how viciously the elder devil disposed of the monk. He stared at the distant flames with a disturbed expression. Strange shrill laughs echoed out from the blaze, and then the flames were extinguished, revealing the devil once more. Henley's mouth twitched when he saw this, and he felt sullen. The elder devil had already taken half-devil form. Although his appearance still resembled that of a human, he had another pair of arms, and all four of them had turned black-purple. A frightening meter-long purple tongue hung from his mouth. It was halfway lifted and firmly holding the monk's nascent soul. As he stared at Han Li with an unflinching gaze, Han Li narrowed his eyes and silently returned it. Monarch's soul divergence then worryingly said, "Youngster Han, you can't tangle with this devil for long. The underground trade fair is nearby, and I fear that in just a moment more will come and it will be difficult for you to break free." "I know. I originally thought to compare his abilities to that of the main soul, but it seems to be too dangerous to fight him. Let's go." Han Li spoke indifferently. With a wave of his hand, the golden flying swords revolving around him let out a cry and they all flew into his sleeve. Afterwards, he opened his mouth and released several balls of blood essence from his mouth, shrouding his body in a blood mist. "Don't you think it's too late to run?" An inhuman light flashed from the elder devil's eyes and his tongue withdrew into his mouth. Then in a blur, he disappeared from sight. Han Li took no notice of these actions and formed a gesture with his hands. In a clap of thunder, silver light flashed and his figure became unclear as blood mist emerged around him. At nearly that same moment, black light flickered in front of Han Li, revealing the elder devil's monstrous form. He was quite a bit quicker than when he had killed the monk despite traveling twice the distance. Han Li now no longer carried his calm air and inwardly shouted in alarm. An evil grin appeared on the devil's face, and he opened his mouth in an attempt to strike at Han Li with his tongue. He was stopped, however, when an icy snort bore into the elder devil's mind. Although his spiritual sense was exceedingly powerful, immense pain flooded through his mind, and he suddenly had to stop his attack. During that delay, Han Li blurred and shot forward in a blur of crimson light, disappearing from sight in the span of a single breath. In the elder devil's alarm, he quickly released his spiritual sense and swept the range of 50 kilometers and found a trace of Han Li. However, he immediately made use of bloodshadow evasion once more and fully escaped from the range of the devil's spiritual sense. The elder devil couldn't help but remain in place. Wasn't that the shadow form evasion, a secret technique of iron-winged devils? How can a cultivator from the mortal realm employ it? This will be troublesome. Wait, there seems to be something different about it. As he muttered to himself, a pensive expression appeared on his face. Spiritual light then flickered from the distant sky, followed by 7 various-colored streaks heading in his direction. The elder devil's expression stirred and he woke from his stupor. A fierce and icy gaze swept past the group. "It's good that you've come. I just finished refining the nascent souls that I've collected. After consuming you lot, my injuries should be fully restored in several years." He eerily muttered to himself. With a deep breath, a large cloud of black-purple devilish chi was released from his body, thoroughly covering himself. His transformation began a step further, growing a second head in addition to his 4 arms. Then, he emotionlessly stared at the oncoming cultivators with 2 pairs of glowing purple eyes. Huayuan Province was a large territory on the eastern shore of the Jin Empire. Most of its towns and cities were constructed on the coast, and there were many overseas cultivators that would arrive here to trade various demon beast materials for a few cultivation resources from inland. As such, the province's markets were prosperous all year long, and the sects were abundantly wealthy, reaping large sums of spirit stones year after year. There were even a few smaller markets farther away, but due to their favorable location, they were also doing quite well. Kaijiang Village was a small town in the province over 100 kilometers off the shore. There was a modest mountain nearby less than a kilometer tall. It possessed an inferior spiritual vein and could barely be considered to be a spiritual mountain. While this 100-bamboo mountain was beneath the notice of larger powers, it was home to a small sect by the name of Heavenly Talisman Sect. The sect seemed to be of the lowest level in the cultivation world, and all the members combined totaled a little over 100. Despite the Heavenly Talisman Sect's poor condition, it had a vast and long history. Tens of thousands of years ago, Taoist Heaven Talisman, the founder of the sect, had created 3 secret talismans whose power shook through the entire Great Jin, managing to bring the sect on par with the 10 great righteous sects. Although it wasn't known as the greatest sect during its climax and didn't have a lineage that spanned back to ancient times, it had tens of thousands of members and was the peak sect in the province. Although the Heavenly Talisman Sect was highly accomplished in the Tao of Talismans, their cultivation techniques were rather ordinary, and talismans could only accomplish so much. Several generations after their rise, they experienced a massive decline. Over the passage of time, they only barely managed to continue existing by passing down a few of their secret talisman techniques. Apart from a few other cultivators from small sects, there were rarely high-grade cultivators that have visited. As such, the disciples on guard duty would often find themselves idle and would rather chat with one another than to cultivate. One day, 2 chi condensation cultivators on guard duty both let out a depressing sigh. A male disciple in his late teens muttered, "Senior Marshal Brother Li, is the market truly going to close? Although I've only entered the sect recently, I still know that the 3 essence market is where nearly half of our income comes from. Without those spirit stones, how can our sect continue to exist?" A youth in his mid-20s of a plump stature helplessly said, "What can we do? Several days ago, the Spirit Wind sect gave our sect master the last notice that either our market will merge with theirs or they will close it in 3 months. They're bullying us with their strength." "Merge markets, that sounds possible." The youngster disciple wore an astonished expression. "HMPH, possible. I heard a martial uncle say that after we merge we're not allowed to interfere with any of the businesses there. The Spirit Wind sect will simply give us 1,000 spirit stones every year. That's less than a third of what we currently make and isn't anywhere near enough," the older youth said with an indignant tone. The younger disciple blinked in disbelief and puzzlingly said, "The Spirit Wind sect might be a larger sect, but how could Gold Mist Mountain, Bright Sun Valley, or our own sect agree to such a small amount? The 3 essence market is something that our sects had created. If we were to join hands, we have nothing to fear from them." The older youth snorted and explained, "If it was only the Spirit Wind sect, then our sect would have nothing to fear. But I heard that Yang Fiend sect has a hand in this matter. A genuine mid-grade sect like theirs isn't something that a small sect like ours can resist." Today, the sect master had invited the masters of our allied sects to discuss a plan of action. They aren't in a better position than us and will not easily give up on the market. The Yang Fiend sect, that is something that our Heavenly Talisman sect can't provoke. It seems it will be difficult for our sect to make it past this trial. The younger disciple was dejected when he heard that sect's name. If their sect received fewer spirit stones, then so would the disciples as well. The older youth sighed and said, "Leave the matter be. This isn't something that low-grade disciples like us can deal with. Let's just guard the mountain the best we can. If we keep on talking about this and a martial uncle finds out, we won't just lose spirit stones, will ye?" "What's that?" Suddenly, he looked to the sky and shouted out in astonishment. When the younger disciple heard this, he looked to the sky as well and saw a light shine from a distance. Afterwards, a 10-meter-long azure streak shot towards their direction. As the azure streak approached them with incredible speed, the younger disciple shouted out in alarm, "It seems a senior is coming to visit us, but who is that?" Although he wasn't acquainted in the cultivation world for long, he understood that the streak of light wasn't something that a Foundation establishment cultivator could produce and felt greatly uneasy. The older youth was at a loss and muttered, "I don't know, perhaps he's come to pay a visit to the martial ancestor." The words only served to console himself. Soon the azure streak arrived above them. As if catching sight of the two disciples, the streak of light dropped to the ground and faded away to reveal an azure-robed youth in his early 20s with his hands held behind his back. Despite his ordinary appearance, he possessed an impressive bearing. When the two met his gaze, they could feel the pressure of a mountain weighing down upon them. It had already been 4 months since Han Li had left the underground trade fair and fled from the Elder Devil. He indifferently asked, "Is this the 100 Bamboo Mountains Heavenly Talisman Sect?" Sensing Han Li's immeasurable cultivation, they soon determined that this cultivator was a senior of at least core formation cultivation. After exchanging a glance, the older youth deeply bowed and said, "Yes, senior. Is there anything I may help you with?" Han Li nodded and said, "It seems I've found the right place. I am carrying something deeply related to your esteemed sect and wish to see your sect master. Go and make the report." "Yes, please wait a moment, senior." The older youth flusteredly took out a sound transmission talisman and whispered a few words before tossing it into the air. The talisman then flew into the mountain's restrictions in a streak of fiery light. Han Li had already swept past the small mountain with his spiritual sense while he calmly stood. Although there was a layer of restrictions present, he was able to sense the general circumstances of the mountain. He frowned as a result. He already knew that the Heavenly Talisman Sect wasn't large before he arrived, but the sect only had 100 members, and he could only sense the faint aura of an early core formation cultivator. It was exactly as Old Man Yun in the Umbra realm had told him. The sect was on the verge of death. Of course, Han Li hadn't come here solely to return the spirit subjugation talisman's refinement method. There were also rumors of several venomous flood dragons appearing in the Huayuan province. Soon, a flicker of yellow light appeared behind the two gatekeepers, along with a 30-meter-tall gate, followed by 3 cultivators walking side by side. They moved past the 2 gatekeeping disciples and were shocked upon seeing Han Li. A yellow-robed old man quickly stepped forward and deeply bowed towards him, respectfully saying, "We are honored by your presence. This junior is Yue Zhen, the Heavenly Talisman Sect Master. I hope you don't take offense that I wasn't able to greet you from a distance." Although he wasn't able to see through Han Li's true cultivation, he had much experience as the sect master and had met many nascent soul cultivators and now sensed an equally powerful presence. He couldn't help but feel fear. Such a powerful cultivator could kill a small sect like theirs with ease. It was difficult to tell whether this occurrence would result in disaster or happiness. From the sound transmission talisman, he originally believed that it was a core formation cultivator. As such, he called on the sect's soul core formation elder to come to the gate, but now he saw that was a meaningless action. When Han Li saw their fearful appearance, he couldn't help but chuckle. "There is no need to be alarmed, as I have no malicious intentions. I have come here to return something I was entrusted with." Yue Zhen felt his heart relax when he heard him and excitedly said, "This junior is a bit confused, but let's not talk here. Please come in and have a seat. We can have the discussion there." After pondering for a moment, Han Li nodded. "Yes, that's fine. This matter isn't something that a few words can clearly explain." "Then I welcome you, senior." Yue Zhen rejoiced and he hastily stood to the side, respectfully having him enter first. Han Li didn't refuse and stepped past the gate. With a solemn expression, the other cultivators obediently followed. The 100 bamboo forest wasn't very large, so they quickly arrived at the sect buildings on top of the mountain. Han Li and the sect master then entered the main hall. To his surprise, there were 2 middle-aged cultivators already sitting in the hall. They frightfully stood up after sensing Han Li's cultivation and hastily bowed. Han Li waved his hand for them to sit back down, but they didn't dare and only stood at the side. Yue Zhen apologetically said, "Fellow Taoists, this is a guest of the sect. We'll have to talk about this matter another time." We are honored by your presence, senior. Please go ahead." "That's right, we'll be taking our leave." The 2 cultivators quickly came to an understanding and wore an expression of admiration before bowing once more and departing from the hall. Then white light flashed from the outside and a colorless streak shot in, revealing a white-robed old man. When Yue Zhen and the others saw him, they hastily saluted with a smile and paid their respects. "Greetings, Martial Uncle Wen." The old man Wen looked at Han Li and his cheek twitched. Then with a hurried salute he said, Senior had said that there is an expert visiting our sect, but I didn't expect that it would be a nascent soul cultivator. It was truly disrespectful of me to not personally welcome you. When Yue Zhen heard old man Wen, he was greatly shocked. With the last traces of doubt in his mind disappeared, he looked at Han Li with awe. Nascent soul cultivators were an unapproachable existence to the current heavenly talisman sect. I was entrusted with something and I'm here to deliver it. There is no need to be reserved. Han Li then paused before continuing. This item has been entrusted to me for some time, and since I found myself in the Huayuan province, I thought I'd take the opportunity to return it. However, it was mentioned that I was only to give this item to the sect master. With that said, he slapped his storage pouch and placed a square bone case onto the table. Old man Wen was alarmed to hear this and tactfully said, Martial nephew Yue, you heard him. Why don't you go ahead and look at the item he's brought? Yes, martial uncle, Yue Zhen respectfully replied. Then he took the bone case into his hands and curiously opened it, revealing several pieces of bone with tiny characters carved into them. He picked up a piece and asked, What's this? Han Li simply smiled as he waited. Then after Yue Zhen looked through them, he excitedly shouted, The Spirit Subjugation Talisman. This is the refinement method for the Spirit Subjugation Talisman. The writing belongs to Marshal Senior Yun. Senior Marshal Brother Yun, are you sure? Old man Wen's expression turned solemn. Completely, Yue Zhen instantly replied. The sect master's study is filled with personal writings of Marshal Senior Yun. How could I be mistaken? The other two cultivators in the room wore an expression of shock. Han Li indifferently added, That's right, this is something that fellow Taoist Yun had given to me. The Spirit Subjugation Talisman should be one of your sect's 3 secret talismans. Of course, but when did you see Senior Marshal Brother Yun? Before I condensed a golden core, Senior Marshal Brother had disappeared when he journeyed overseas. It has been tens of years since we've last heard of him. Is he all right? Old man Wen asked with concern. He should be fine, but in truth, I only met him by chance decades ago. At the time, Han Li gave a vague explanation of the ghost mist and the Umbra realm. Of course, he left out mention of the Umbra beast gems and other sensitive matters. Old man Wen felt his heart run cold after hearing of this land. So there was such a dangerous place in this world. That is truly hard to imagine. It is no wonder there would be cultivators that occasionally disappear along the coast. It was due to that ghost mist. Han Li's eyes stirred and he smiled, saying, That's right, I had to expend quite a bit of strength in order to escape. The box was something fellow Taoist Yun had entrusted me to give back to his sect if I had the opportunity. However, I am quite interested in the Tao of Talismans and have done a bit of research on the Spirit Subjugation Talisman. I hope you won't take offense at this. Old man Wen said with a respectful expression, It is already an enormous kindness of Senior to personally return the Spirit Subjugation Talisman to the sect. How could we have such poor judgment over this matter? Although the Spirit Subjugation Talisman is one of our sect's secrets, it would have been lost to us forever if you hadn't returned it. Naturally, we will not take offense. Yue Zhen agreed as well. Han Li nodded with satisfaction and then promptly stood up. I am grateful at how open-minded you are, but now that I've brought this back to you, I must take my leave. I have an important matter to attend to. Although Old Man Wen was perfectly happy with receiving the Spirit Subjugation Talisman previously lost to them, he wasn't about to ignore the expert that had suddenly appeared before them. He quickly said, Senior, we've yet to repay you for bringing this back to us. Wouldn't it be better to stay at the sect for a few days and have us as a host? So long as they were able to befriend a nascent soul cultivator, the Heavenly Talisman sect's position as a small sect would massively rise. Even the great problem raised by their rival sect would be easily resolved. Then I'll stay for a moment more, Han Li said, wearing a mysterious smile. Yue Zhen blinked and then added, Isn't Senior Han interested in the Tao of Talismans? Our sect may lack in other areas, but we do have a bit of knowledge in that regard. Our predecessors have collected various records relating to talismans. If Senior would like, he may take a look at them and perhaps provide us with a bit of guidance in passing. Records of talisman refinement. Han Li felt his heart stir in surprise. Old man Wen was stunned for a moment and nodded. Ever since Han Li learned the Spirit Subjugation Talisman, he was greatly interested in the other secret talismans of the sect. As such, he eventually nodded and said, All right, as I am interested in talisman refinement, I will remain at your sect for a few days. Old man Wen rejoiced and said, That is great. Our sect is honored to have you, Senior. Would you like to first take a rest? There is no need. Go ahead and lead me to your records hall. Han Li shook his head. At his current cultivation, it would only take a moment's time for him to restore the magic power he used when traveling. Old Man Wen smiled and pointed to the middle-aged man at the corner. Good. Marshal Nephew Yan will guide you to our records hall. He then looked at the man and said, if Senior has any commands, follow them to the best of your ability. As you bid, Marshal Uncle Wen. Senior Han, please follow me. The middle-aged cultivator respectfully accepted his orders and guided Han Li out. Old Man Wen waited a long while after Han Li left the hall before letting out a sigh. I didn't expect that Senior Marshal Brother Yun was actually trapped in such a cursed land. It is no wonder he disappeared. It is quite fortunate that we were able to reacquire the spirit subjugation talisman, though. One of the other cultivators in the room slowly said, but if we have the opportunity to befriend this Senior Han, the problem with the market will be easily solved, let alone anything else. Yue Zhen Riley smiled and said, with a nascent soul cultivator backing us, the Spirit Wind sect should withdraw. Even the Yang Fiend sect wouldn't provoke a nascent soul cultivator over a trifling market city. But from Senior Han's tone, it seemed that he only had an ordinary relationship with Senior Marshal Brother Yun. Given his identity, there is no reason for him to help us. Even if we try to curry favor with him, there is nothing in the sect that be of interest to him, yet it would be too pitiful to waste this opportunity. This is somewhat troublesome, Old Man Yun said with a frown. The other cultivators in the hall glanced at each other with worry. At that moment, Han Li was following the middle-aged cultivator to an unremarkable building. That building was 3 stories tall and covered in a faint blue barrier. When they went inside, Han Li saw an old man inside, sitting cross-legged on a mat. He had a jade slip in his hands and appeared to be reading through it. The middle-aged man glanced at the man and immediately commanded, Marshal Nephew Li, come greet Senior Han. He then turned to Han Li and said, this is Marshal Nephew Li. He is responsible for taking care of this place and should know much about the records it contains. At that moment, the old man was awakened by the middle-aged man's voice and hastily put away the jade slip before quickly standing up. He had a wrinkly face and thin eyes that appeared quite sly. So it was Marshal Senior Yang. I hope you'll forgive me for not coming out to welcome you, and this must be Senior Han. After smiling at the middle-aged man, he looked at Han Li and his expression froze. Marshal Nephew Li. Han Li looked at the old man's face with a strange expression and widely opened eyes. Does Senior recognize this disciple? The middle-aged cultivator asked in surprise. Han Li quickly regained his composure and faintly smiled, saying, it's nothing, just that this fellow Taoist looks similar to an old friend of mine. But after a closer look, I found myself to be mistaken. The middle-aged cultivator didn't believe him, but he didn't dare to question him. He simply chuckled and said, so that's the case. Marshal Nephew Li, come with me. This Senior will be staying here. You won't be needed. Yes, I. Han Li smiled and then he took a deep look at the old man. There is no need. Since this fellow Taoist Li understands much about the records in this building, I may have use of him. Let's have him accompany me over the next few days. Although the middle-aged man appeared puzzled, he was somewhat envious that this Marshal Nephew Li was able to stay together with this nascent soul cultivator over the next few days. With hardly any effort, Han Li could provide vast benefits to any low-grade cultivator. He sighed and said, since that is what Senior wants, I will naturally comply. Marshal Nephew Li, you have quite a bit of luck. You must follow Senior's orders. However, Han Li's words clearly stated that he wouldn't be staying here for long. After giving the old man a few orders, the middle-aged cultivator took his leave. Han Li watched him depart from the building, and then looked at the old man with a deep smile. After Han Li carefully examined the old man, his expression shifted and said, would you prefer me to address you as Senior Marshal Brother Xiang or Senior Marshal Brother Li? The old man blinked and his previously odd look had completely disappeared. Then with a smile he said, I don't quite understand what Senior Han is saying. Could it be that I resemble an old acquaintance of yours? Han Li frowned and narrowed his eyes. There is no point in trying to conceal yourself. As you well know, cultivators have vast and accurate memories. In the trial of fire and blood, we were among the few Yellow Maple Valley disciples that managed to survive. How could I have forgotten you after so many years? During the time of the trial by blood and fire, this was the old man who had proposed to form a group with Han Li. At the time, he was named Xianxia Audiobook, and possessed cultivation at the 10th layer of chi condensation. It had been greatly surprising that he managed to emerge alive, but Han Li's amazing accomplishments had caused the others to overlook him. His survival in the trial and careful nature, faintly, gave Han Li an impression that he was hiding a secret. After Han Li achieved foundation establishment, he became a disciple of Li Hueyuan, a core formation elder of Yellow Maple Valley. With no further contact with old man Xiang, Han Li gradually ceased to think about him, and after the Devil Dao's invasion of the state of Yue, the old man's survival was unknown. In the past, he was already old, and despite the hundreds of years that had passed, he was still a chi condensation cultivator and appeared completely the same. Even a foundation establishment cultivator would have long perished from age. It was completely unthinkable that he would rediscover him so many years later at a small sect in a foreign country. At the very least, during the trial of blood and fire, he was certain to be a character of hidden power. It was unknown what his intentions had been at the time. Han Li stared at the old man as various thoughts flashed through his mind. The old man spoke with a steady tone. "There are countless mysteries in this world, and it appears that there is someone who looks exactly like me. But I can assure you, my surname is Li, not Xiang. If I truly was this person, why would I deny it?" A trace of astonishment appeared as Han Li's face sank. After a moment of silence, his expression relaxed. "Perhaps I am mistaken, so let's leave it be then. How about fellow Taoists point me to a few records on talisman refinement?" The old man chuckled and said, "As per our namesake, we do have quite a few records on hand. However, the more profound accounts are on the second story. Please follow me, senior." He then led Han Li to the second story as expected of an ordinary low-grade disciple. The first two stories were similarly arranged and filled with many shelves. As Han Li glanced around, the old man had already begun to quickly move through the halls with a swiftness that was unexpected of his age. A short moment later, he picked out a pile of jade slips with great skill and panted as he held them in his hands. With a fawning tone, he said, "Senior, here are the floor's talisman refinement records. There are a few on the third floor as well. I'll go ahead and save you the trouble of finding them." Han Li stroked his chin and wore a friendly smile. "There is no need. These jade slips are already enough to last me 2 days. I'll personally look for those records should I have the time. You may go ahead and attend to your duties. Then I won't further bother your studies. If Senior has any commands, please call out to me. I will be staying downstairs." The old man widely smiled and then placed the jade slips on a nearby table before carefully walking down the stairs. After Han Li watched him descend, his smile slowly faded away to heavy expression. Is Senior Soul Divergence able to see through his cultivation? I already swept my spiritual sense past his body, and although I was able to break through a layer of his illusions, I still wasn't able to determine his true cultivation. It was as if his entire body is composed of illusions. It is the same with me. Even with my superior spiritual sense, I couldn't see past him, Monarch Soul Divergence replied. Could it be this person's spiritual sense is far beyond that of both mine and Senior's? Han Li said with some disturbance. Very unlikely. Even if a cultivator were to possess spiritual sense stronger than ours, it wouldn't be by such a great amount that they would be able to completely evade our detection. Under these circumstances, this person either cultivated an extraordinary secret technique, possesses a grand treasure, or even. Monarch Soul Divergence then trailed off. Even what? Han Li asked. Monarch Soul Divergence hesitantly said, "There is one other possibility. This person has already entered deity transformation stage. He would be able to scatter the entirety of his spiritual power from his meridians into his physical body, and would also be able to phase away his nascent soul for a short while so that no one would be able to detect it." Despite Han Li's steady disposition, he couldn't help but betray shock. Senior must be joking. A deity transformation cultivator. Monarch Soul Divergence calmly said, "Although I wasn't able to enter deity transformation stage, I have done a bit of research on the topic. These are the most basic abilities that they can perform." Han Li let out a deep breath and said, "I didn't question their abilities, but whether they'd stay in this world. Shouldn't deity transformation cultivators be capable of ascending to the spiritual realm?" With a perplexed tone, Monarch Soul Divergence answered, "While I had roamed the world in the past and have yet to discover one, I'm certain they still lingered in this world, and in no small number either. The ability to ascend to the spirit realm and whether they have the power to are two different things. I'm not too sure of the details, but after they enter deity transformation stage, they can't often show themselves like ordinary cultivators or disaster will afflict them. So it was like that. Senior, how come you've never mentioned this to me? Monarch's soul divergence annoyedly snorted. What would be the point? You haven't even reached late nascent soul stage yet. I'm sure you'd come to realize this once you were able to advance past that. Why else would deity transformation stage cultivators all agree to disappear from the cultivation world? And Lee Riley smiled and said, then the cultivator downstairs has a chance of being a deity transformation stage cultivator. Yes, but even if he isn't a deity transformation cultivator, he still gives me a sense of fear. You'd best avoid provoking him. After some thought, Han Li said, so you also had the same sensation. That was why I had changed my tone after I went up to the second floor. Since this person traveled all the way here, he should have his own objective in mind. For the time being, let's pretend nothing's wrong. Yes, and if possible, let's depart from the Heavenly Talisman sect as soon as we can. If this person is truly what we fear, he could decide to kill you to keep his secret, Monarch's soul divergence warned. Han Li shook his head, but if I leave too quickly, it could end up provoking him instead. For the time being, let's stay a few more days. Since he's concealed himself and changed his name, he must under the effects of the limitation you mentioned if he's a deity transformation cultivator. Monarch's soul divergence dryly laughed and uttered, your words do make sense. It seems I haven't thought the matter through. He then changed the subject and said, but now that you've mostly recovered from the drain of using the blood shadow evasion technique, you should begin refining my puppet body. Han Li grunted in agreement. I'll get right on it after I finish slaying those flood dragons. After all, scarlet flame flood dragon scales must be acquired soon as they won't stay there forever. As for the black phoenix feather, there is no need to hurry over the matter. I can acquire it after the puppet body is finished. Monarch's soul divergence heartily laughed with satisfaction. That will do. So long as I can see that puppet body before I perish, I will have no regrets. Han Li smiled when he heard this and didn't speak any further. Then he waved his sleeve, releasing several formation flags around him. In a flash of light, the flags disappeared to be replaced with a faint azure mist covering the entire floor. Although he didn't believe that the old man would suddenly attack, it never hurt to be prepared. Han Li then walked up to the table with the jade slips and took one into his hand before immersing his spiritual sense into it. Han Li stayed in the Heavenly Talisman Sect's record hall for 3 days and read through the jade slips related to talisman refinement. There were quite a few secret techniques, and he nonchalantly duplicated some of their contents so he could further research them at a later time. Shockingly, a few records had even elaborated a bit on the other 2 secret talismans of the Heavenly Talisman Sect. The spirit form talisman was peculiar in that it entered one's body. It would then be tempered inside the dantian and could be used endlessly. If one nurtured it to a stage, not only will it become limitlessly sharp, but one would be able to use Devil Dao techniques like cataclysmic graft without the sacrifice of a limb. Chapter 573. During Han Li's battle with the disciple of Archsaint Sixbeths in the scattered star seas, the disciple used a technique called cataclysmic graft. It allowed him to sacrifice a limb and some vitality in order to completely avoid the damage of an otherwise lethal attack. The other talisman was the six-peak armor talisman. It condenses the nearby spiritual chi into a 6-layered shield. If given an endless source, the 6-layered shield would endlessly reform itself. It was one of the few incredible techniques that could control worldly spiritual chi that didn't involve deity transformation cultivation. Of the sect's 3 secret talismans, the spirit form talisman was the easiest to grasp. After a cultivator entered core formation stage, they would be able to nurture it in their dantian. He reckoned that successive cultivators of the sect used this ability. However, the might of the talisman not only depended on the cultivation of the user and the time it was nurtured, but also the quality of the materials used to refine it, very much like a magic treasure. The 6-peak armor talisman was different. So long as it was refined, anyone could use it. The might of this talisman depended on the concentration of worldly spiritual chi in its surroundings. Under ideal circumstances, it would display astonishing might. According to the records of a past sect elder, the 6-peak armor talisman refinement method was lost when Master Heaven Talisman passed away. Back when the Heavenly Talisman sect was at its peak, they were alarmed by this disappearance and made its recovery the sect's top priority for many generations after. Unfortunately, they weren't able to find the slightest clue of its whereabouts, and the search came to an end. As for the soul subjugation talisman, it hadn't been refined ever since the founding of the sect. As a result, only the spirit form talisman truly had any practical use. Han Li was greatly interested in the other two talismans. The spirit form talisman in particular was an optimal life-saving measure, as it would allow him to use sacrificial techniques. 3 days later, Han Li read through the last talisman of interest to him and had finally stood up. He swept his spiritual sense down below and found that old man Xiang was still there. He frowned and mulled with worry. In these past few days, the old man had remained in peaceful cultivation and hadn't taken a step outside of the building. As for the circumstances outside, Han Li had found it to be quite laughable. Fearing that he would depart without warning, the sect's foundation establishment cultivators had taken turns waiting outside. After some further thought, he descended to the ground floor. "Senior, are you finished reading?" When the old man saw Han Li appear, he immediately put away the jade slip in his hand and grinned. Han Li smiled and said, "Yes, I've seen everything I wanted to. You may do as you please." Afterwards, he made his way out. A bright glint flashed from the old man's eyes as he watched Han Li depart, but his expression soon returned to normal. When he left the building, he caught sight of the middle-aged man who brought him here. When the man saw Han Li, he hastily greeted him and respectfully requested that he make a trip to the main hall. After perusing through their collection of records, Han Li agreed, as it would be inappropriate for him to refuse. The middle-aged man happily sent a voice transmission talisman to the main hall. Waiting there was the upper echelon of the Heavenly Talisman Sect and two unfamiliar middle-aged core formation cultivators, a man and a woman. When the Heavenly Talisman Sect members saw Han Li, they saluted him. The sect elder Wen then gave an introduction. "These two are fellow Taoist Chang of Gold Mist Mountain and fellow Taoist Zai of Bright Yang Valley." When these two fellow Taoists heard that Senior had graced us with his presence, they had come here to pay their respects and have been waiting ever since. "Ah, you two are quite considerate to have waited while I had spent the past few days researching talisman refinement techniques." Han Li wore an indifferent expression that betrayed no emotion. "Hardly, it is our honor to be able to see you." After the two made certain of Han Li's cultivation, they both saluted him. In truth, when the Heavenly Talisman Sect requested them to arrive, the two had doubted if they truly had a visitor who possessed nascent soul cultivation. After all, the two were well aware of the Heavenly Talisman Sect's current circumstances. Although they were all classified as small sects, the Heavenly Talisman Sect was the weakest of the three in their alliance, so it was rather surprising for a nascent soul cultivator to visit them. The benefits were obvious if it were true. The two hadn't remained idle when they heard this and rushed over to the sect overnight to verify this matter. Their doubts were now dispelled after personally witnessing Han Li's profound cultivation. It was only after Han Li took a seat that the others dared to follow suit. Apart from the Heavenly Talisman Sect Master, the other Foundation establishment cultivators simply stood at the side. The woman's surname, Zai said with a pleasant voice. "Has Senior gained anything from his stay in the records hall? If Senior is interested, we do have a few records on the matter as well, although our valley isn't particularly adept in talisman refinement techniques." Han Li smiled at the woman and said, "There is no need to trouble you. I have some urgent business at hand and will need to soon depart to the Linjiang province." The man surnamed Chang yelped out in surprise. "Does Senior mean to deal with those fierce flood dragons?" "Oh, you know about it?" Han Li asked with a changed expression. With a hesitant tone, Cultivator Chang said, "The cultivators journeying to the Linjiang province are all going for the fierce flood dragons. I'm afraid Senior's information isn't very new." Han Li's expression sank and he slowly said, "I acquired this news half a year ago at a market. Since the flood dragons are around grade 7, they shouldn't have been so quickly hunted by other cultivators." "Not at all," Old Man Wen hastily explained. "In fact, not long ago they managed to kill a flood dragon in an ambush. But the flood dragons fiercely retaliated and killed many cultivators in return. There was even a nascent soul cultivator that was gravely injured." "How was the nascent soul cultivator injured?" Han Li asked with surprise. Old Man Wen answered, "A transformed grade 8 blue flood dragon had appeared amongst them. The cultivators who lied in ambush had suffered heavy losses since they hadn't expected it. While the South Sea sect had dispatched many elders, they were only able to repel the group of flood dragons. The flood dragons had made their way to the many islands by the shore and hid there, frequently attacking lone cultivators and mortal ships in the vicinity. If nascent soul cultivators grouped and attacked them together, the flood dragons would immediately flee deep into the ocean using ice evasion techniques. Their attacks have become increasingly vicious recently, and far more troublesome. I heard that the South Sea Sect have already invited many high-grade cultivators to gather at Jade Blossom Island in preparation of a hunt, as Grade 8 flood dragons are rarely ever seen. A Grade 8 flood dragon, Hanley muttered to himself with a calm expression. He was reminded of the Grade 8 venomous flood dragon he had killed in the past. Although the demon beast was only Grade 8, they had a true strength that was beyond that of a mid-nascent soul cultivator. On top of this, it was particularly difficult to deal with when it was at sea. However, Hanley had no interest in the blue flood dragon. He then asked, I recall that there was a red fire attribute flood dragon among them, a scarlet flame flood dragon in particular. Is this true? Cultivator Chang seemed to know much about the matter and quickly answered, there does seem to be a red flood dragon among them, but I'm not too sure if it is a scarlet flame flood dragon. That will do, Hanley nodded with satisfaction. When the others in the hall saw that Hanley's face had relaxed, they all sighed with relief. At that moment, Old Man Wen and the other two exchanged a glance. Then he probingly asked, Senior Han's cultivation is quite vast. Surely you must be an elder of a great sect. Hanley glanced at the three and wore a mysterious smile. He, I came from a rather remote region. I am not the elder of any sect in the Great Jin. Hanley's sharp gaze had startled the group, but upon hearing his words, they couldn't help but rejoice. After a moment of hesitation, Old Man Wen then cautiously asked, since Senior has already researched the spirit subjugation talisman, what does he think of it? Is it worthy of your notice? Hanley sighed and bluntly said, if you have anything to say, state it. There is no point in beating around the bush. Could it be you wish to have me enter your sect? After hearing Hanley's unhappy tone, Old Man Wen as alarmed and quickly explained, please don't misunderstand, Senior. I wouldn't dare to have such an extravagant request. I only wish to ask if Senior is willing to become a joint guest elder of our three sects. A guest elder, Hanley soon narrowed his eyes. Small and mid-grade sects in the Great Jin would often have a sect position for high-grade vagrant cultivators. Although the position sounded the same as an ordinary elder, in truth there were quite a few differences. To small sects, guest elders were only that in name. Guest elders couldn't be restricted by the sect and wouldn't be bound to their orders either. Typically, they would only find the need to take action when their sects were subjected to mishaps. However, even this assistance wasn't mandatory and depended on the mood of the elder. Guest elders were even paid appropriately of their position, and sometimes were paid even more than ordinary elders. The reason why the position of guest elder was widespread in the Great Jin was due to the vast number of small sects and lacking number of nascent soul cultivators in comparison. Let alone small sets, even mid-grade sects would find themselves lacking a nascent soul cultivator at times. Under such circumstances, it would only be natural for them to strive their hardest for the support of a vagrant nascent soul cultivator. But usually vagrant high-grade cultivators found it disdainful to enter the restrictions of a sect, but were tempted by the compensation. As a result, the position of guest elder came to be. When Hanley heard the Heavenly Talisman sect elder carefully mention this proposal, his cheek twitched before he faintly smiled. How did you think I would respond to your request of becoming the guest elder of your three sects? Old Man Wen's apprehension calmed after seeing that Hanley wasn't angry, and he hastily explained. We understand that small sects like ours do not have the qualifications for senior to enter our employment, so we only need you to settle a dispute of ours and allow us to use your name as protection. We wouldn't dare to trouble any further. Hanley blinked and said, you mean to say that I'll only have to act once and I'll have no need to look after you in the future? That's right. Of course, we won't have senior act for nothing. Since you are interested in talisman refinement techniques, our Heavenly Talisman sect is willing to bestow the spirit form talisman technique to you. The Gold Mist Mountain and Bright Yang sect will also hand over their legacy techniques to you. Additionally, we've prepared tens of thousands of spirit stones. We hope Senior will accept them. Old Man Wen knew that he would only anger Hanley if he tried to be clever, so he spoke with a direct tone instead. Tens of thousands of spirit stones, Hanley asked with a smile. It is truly too few spirit stones, but we'll be able to continue offering a sum of spirit stones every year. Additionally, we are willing to bestow the spirit form talisman that our founder had originally refined over to you. Senior should have the ability to refine such an item. Old Man Wen spoke with gritted teeth, as if it was the final condition he could offer. Your founder, Do you mean Taoist Heaven Talisman? Han Li's expression began to stir. Sect Master Yue Zhen then took the initiative to say, "That's right. I must tell Senior that although the sect founder was able to display its great, it was a pity that the later generations of our sect weren't capable enough to refine the item. As such, our sect passed the talisman down for countless years and witnessed the treasure's spiritual nature gradually fade over time, but we were helpless to do anything. If Senior is able to make use of it, it will solve this problem as well. Your sect still possessed such a treasure. I want to take a look," Han Li said with a trace of excitement. Old Man Wen rejoiced at seeing Han Li's interest and hastily commanded, "Martial Nephew Yue, take out the talisman and let Senior look at it." Although he possessed the highest cultivation in the Heavenly Talisman sect, the founder's original spirit form talisman was something that was only kept by the sect masters. "Yes, Martial Uncle." Yue Zhen immediately slapped his storage pouch and summoned a yellow wood case, then presenting it over to Han Li with both hands. Han Li simply waved his hand when he saw this and summoned the case into his hand. Then, he lowered his gaze and examined it. The wooden box was unremarkable and rather plain apart from the shining golden talisman sealing it. Han Li raised his brow and brushed his hand against the box, causing the talisman to float off in a flash of light. The three-core formation elders were particularly alarmed, but the other cultivators seemed unfazed. Being able to use spiritual power to take off a sealing talisman wasn't something that ordinary cultivators could do. Not only did their cultivation have to be immense, but their control of magic power must reach an unfathomable stage. They had only heard of this ability from hearsay, but now that they saw Han Li calmly display this, they viewed him with even greater respect. The box opened to release a cloud of sparkling azure light, composed of pure wood attribute spiritual qi. Han Li was deeply shocked. According to what Old Man Wen said, this talisman had been losing its spiritual nature for many years, but it was still clearly very powerful. But what made him even happier was that this spirit form talisman was actually a wood attribute talisman, something that would greatly complement his cultivation technique. It would make it much easier to nurture. With that in mind, Han Li began to examine the glowing talisman. The talisman was the size of a hand and was emerald green, but golden and silver characters faintly surrounded it in a mysterious display. However, what attracted Han Li's attention was a small ball of faint purple light faintly revolving around the center. Han Li covered his hand in a layer of azure light and reached out for the talisman. Then, in a flash of light, the talisman trembled and streaked out from the box. Han Li's expression sank upon seeing that it escaped. He then formed a fist, and an illusory hand grabbed the talisman midair. Before the other cultivators could show their surprise, the hand of light had disappeared and the talisman was in Han Li's grasp. Han Li stared at the squirming talisman in his hand and chuckled. "So this is the spirit form talisman. It is quite impressive. I heard that Taoist Heaven Talisman was a late nascent soul stage cultivator. Given the cultivation that was used to nurture this talisman, it wouldn't be easy for ordinary cultivators to refine it. And even if it is fully refined, its might will greatly decrease and will require further nurturing. This isn't something that can be done in a few short decades. If done improperly, it could take over 100 years. Old Man Wen and the other exchanged a glance when they heard this. With a sullen heart, he asked, "Does Senior think this talisman?" That would be what an early nascent soul cultivator would say. Since I'm at mid-stage with a wood attribute cultivation art, I would have an easier time refining this talisman. Han Li spoke indifferently, but in truth, there were quite a few things Han Li didn't say. Although it would take quite a while for him to hone the talisman, with further tempering the talisman would certainly surpass its original strength. "So Senior agrees?" Old Man Wen happily asked. The other cultivators in the hall looked at Han Li with hopeful faces. "Not yet. First, tell me about this problem you want me to resolve. I could accept if it isn't too troublesome," Han Li said. Then with a shake of his hand, the talisman returned to the wooden box and was sealed once more. Old Man Wen was overjoyed to hear that Han Li would consider the matter and quickly began to explain. "Of course, in truth, the matter should be only a trivial effort for you. This matter is related to a market that we share, over the past few days." Han Li calmly listened to him, and a quarter-hour later, he flew out from the sect and headed north. Several days had passed, and an affair of moderate importance in the Huayuan province had occurred. The Heavenly Talisman sect's guest elder Han suddenly arrived at the Devil Dao's Yang Fiend sect. Given his vast abilities in cultivation, he was able to easily defeat the sole nascent soul elder of the Yang Fiend sect and quickly departed afterwards. The next day, the Spirit Wind Sect, who previously had the backing of the Yang Fiend Sect, suddenly relocated their market to a faraway region. Not only this, but the other small and mid-sized sects were alarmed by what they heard, and they all abandoned the nearby region, giving the Heavenly Talisman Sect and their allies complete control. For the time being, the three sects felt triumph. The three elders in particular felt that their investment had paid off. With the name of the mid-nascent Soul Guest Elder protecting them, they reckoned they'd be able to surge in strength over the next 100 years. At that moment, the Huayuan province's top sect, the South Sea Sect, had called together the Flood Dragon Extermination Hunt. Over a few short days, they managed to gather over 200 core formation cultivators and 10 nascent soul cultivators. Afterwards, they split into different squads to sweep various areas of the nearby sea for the hidden flood dragons. They would occasionally find a few low-grade demon beasts and exterminate them. Eventually, the human cultivators surged in momentum and planned to complete the hunt in a single move. However, the flood dragons were quite cunning, and when they saw that something was amiss, they hid deep in the sea for several months. With no further trace of them, a portion of the cultivators lost their patience and abandoned the hunt. As further months passed by, there were now only about 100 cultivators in the hunt. As for the nascent soul cultivators, their numbers were now 7. With these amount of cultivators, they were no longer able to act in great force, and the flood dragons saw an opportunity. They immediately began to move. Not only did they begin to attack lone cultivators, but the Grade 8 blue flood dragon began to occasionally launch attacks on the squads of cultivators. Although these squads would have nascent soul cultivators leading them, the Grade 8 flood dragon possessed great abilities, and its ice evasion techniques have reached perfection. After each attack, it would immediately escape any further conflict. As a result, it was able to devour many core formation cultivators without injury. The remaining cultivators were thoroughly struck with fear, and the South Sea Sect found themselves between a rock and a hard place. They could only continue to gather more cultivators so that they may resume the hunt. One day, a group of a dozen core formation cultivators being led by a nascent soul cultivator was slowly flying across the sea. They had carefully released their spiritual sense around them, taking extra care to look into the sea below them. Among these cultivators was Han Li, who was disguised as a pale, middle-aged man. He was flying at the back of the group with a calm expression, contrary to the irritation he felt. When the flood dragon extermination was called, Han Li entered their ranks as a core formation cultivator, hoping to take advantage of the situation. But he didn't expect that he wouldn't make any gains during this time. Ever since the flood dragons had resurfaced, all squads that went out on patrols were ambushed once or twice. The squad he joined was the only one that hadn't encountered a single one. This caused Han Li to be speechless. He truly didn't know if his luck was amazing or utterly terrible. Currently, Han Li's party was thousands of kilometers to the west of Jade Blossom Island. A few days ago, a party of cultivators were ambushed by a Grade 8 blue flood dragon. Although the flood dragon was rather cunning and wouldn't likely stay in the vicinity, the South Sea Sect had sent them on a search regardless to see if they could acquire any unexpected gains. When in the presence of so many people, Han Li couldn't fully use his spiritual sense, or he would risk attracting the attention of the nascent soul cultivator leading their squad. He could only release enough spiritual sense for him to detect traces of the flood dragons ahead of time, which was 5 kilometers around him and the surface of the ocean. As the day went on, they finished most of their search, but surprisingly, they weren't able to find anything. Suddenly, a cultivator at the front yelled out in surprise, "What's that?" And Li turned his attention from the sea to the sky after hearing this, catching sight of surging clouds that spanned for over a kilometer flying towards them. An uproar was raised amongst the group, and one of them shouted with delight, "This is good. There should be a high-grade demon beast within. Do not allow it to escape." One of the more vigilant cultivators hesitantly said, "Something is amiss. Those flood dragons usually flee as soon as they see us. So then why would they take the initiative to approach us? Do they have some sort of plan?" The nascent soul cultivator leading the squad was a large middle-aged man who wore golden robes. He frowned when he heard the two and unconsciously turned in their direction. However, his face suddenly froze and he loudly shouted, "Be careful. There are demon beasts approaching us from another direction." When the group heard this, they were frightened into action. They all spat out their magic treasures and prepared themselves for battle, but as far as the eye could see, they couldn't find any trace of a demon beast. The cultivators glanced at one another. Just as they were about to speak, an ear-piercing roar shook the air. Then, various colored clouds had appeared in the distance. They continuously lurched and revealed the faint silhouettes of flood dragons from within. But what was most noteworthy were the two particularly large demon clouds in the east and the west, glowing in red and blue light respectively, making for a gorgeous display. At this close distance, the cultivators could feel the fearsome power of the flood dragons that the clouds contained. Most turned pale with terror, and one of them even lost himself to fear and cried out, "How can this be? Two Grade 8 demon beasts." Another Grade 8 flood dragon had made a sudden appearance. They were no longer satisfied with ambushing them, but now wanted to completely eliminate them. The hunters have turned into the hunted. The squad leader was still able to keep his calm under the circumstances, and he fiercely barked, "Don't panic. Quickly send word to the other squads. Divide into groups to face the enemy. Do not let them gather together, their strength will become even greater. And don't even try to escape. With their water movement techniques, they'll be able to pick us off one by one." The orders steadied the group, and several immediately released a flurry of voice transmission talismans into the sky. The leader then sullenly added, "I will go and deal with one of the Grade 8 flood dragons. Two cultivators skilled in evasion techniques should tie down the other to keep it occupied for a while. You don't need to fight it. As for everyone else, go and stall the Grade 7 flood dragons." But this time, the cultivators looked at each other in dismay. Although these cultivators couldn't prove to be their match, they were confident in surviving the Grade 7 flood dragons for a time. But wasn't it asking for too much for only two of them to fight against the Grade 8 flood dragon? Even if it were only to stall for time, ordinary cultivators couldn't last for long. "If two won't do, then let's have three," their leader anxiously spoke. Not long after, thunder sounded out and an astonishing scene had occurred. An unremarkable cultivator from their group suddenly took to the skies with overbearing momentum, turning into a streak of blinding azure light as it flew towards the crimson cloud. A nascent soul cultivator at mid-nascent soul stage. Those present shouted out in both surprise and delight. Their leader also rejoiced. Could it be the South Sea sect felt that something was amiss and hid a nascent soul cultivator in my group? With that thought, he turned his sights on the incoming sapphire cloud and charged towards it without another thought. Seeing that the two biggest threats were being blocked by nascent soul cultivators, the squad's morale rose and they flew off in different directions to obstruct the other approaching demon clouds. Soon, lights began to shine in every direction, followed by the sounds of distant explosions. But unlike the others, the cloud in front of Han Li remained motionless as a sea of scarlet inferno burned around him. He was protected by a layer of faint purple flames, and it would only let out the crackle of an occasional singe, a sound that was nothing in comparison to the thunderous booms echoing from the other battles. 100 meters in front of him, there was a transformed half-human demon beast. He was surrounded by a pillar of flames and was coldly glaring at Han Li. Although the demon appeared to be mostly human, his body was covered in sparkling fist-sized scarlet scales, and variously sized threads of flame were streaming out from his body. Han Li widely smiled and said, "So it was actually a scarlet flame flood dragon. I was right in coming. Your scales will prove much more effective than a Grade 7 one. You're going to fight me." The transformed scarlet flood dragon blankly stared at Han Li before widely grinning, revealing snow-white fangs. Then, with a green glint from his eyes, the flame pillar surrounding him surged with an astonishing pressure. Despite the flood dragon's fierce display, he truly felt anxious. The cultivator who charged towards him was not only at mid-nascent soul stage, but his purple ice attribute flames were profoundly lethal. These weird flames restrained his own diligently cultivated demon flames, and that will greatly restrict his own abilities. Furthermore, Han Li's calm attitude had caused his heart to tremble for some unknown reason. The flood dragon faintly felt that disaster would soon befall him, and became even more uneasy. Han Li chuckled and indifferently said, "The reason why I came here was because I heard that there were Grade 7 flood dragons. Now that you're here, I no longer have any interest in those minor prizes. However, I also don't have much of an interest in killing you since you were able to cultivate to this stage, and am willing to let you go. How about you take the initiative to hand over the vital scales on your neck and have the other flood dragons depart?" "My vital scales? Your tone is truly bold. Does a trifling mid-nascent soul cultivator dare to be so arrogant? Let's see if your attitude will persist after you turn to ash." Han Li's words had thrown the flood dragon into a rage. Vital scales were something that a flood dragon kept since they were born and were irreplaceable. As they aged, much of their magic power and vitality would be cultivated into their scales, similar to a demon core. If lost, they would lose nearly half of their cultivation. Enraged, the half-human flood dragon began to distort, and a soft bang sounded out. The flame pillar surrounding it scattered, revealing a 20-meter-long and meter-thick scarlet flood dragon. The original fear in his mind was replaced completely by a thirst to rend Han Li to shreds. As soon as the beast revealed its demon form, it opened its mouth and spat a stream of crimson lava towards Han Li. When he saw this, he raised his brow and muttered, "Concentrated flame slag. This demon flame has been well cultivated. It seems I'll have to personally take action." With that said, Han Li didn't dare to tarry. Slapping the back of his head, he spat out the snow crystal pearl. As soon as a pearl appeared, it immediately expanded to the size of a fist and directly flew forward to meet the attack. At the same time, Han Li softly spoke and pointed at the pearl before muttering a short incantation. The pearl ignited in a purple blaze, quickly forming a 3-meter-long flood dragon of raging flame with the pearl held in its mouth. As soon as the purple dragon took shape, it charged forward to meet the lava steam. With a loud snap, a white mist suddenly filled the air and enveloped the two of them. The purple flame dragon was using the pearl in its mouth to spit out a stream of purple flames, slowly pushing back the lava. When the scarlet flood dragon saw this, a hint of fear was betrayed from his face. But soon, an ominous gleam shined from his eyes and scarlet light glowed from his body as he let out a fierce screech. The sea of flames surrounding Han Li was roused by the noise, and began to form two 30-meter-tall waves of flame to crush him from opposing directions. Han Li coldly smiled when he saw this. He slapped his hands together and then separated them to point at the waves of lava. Purple light flickered in front of him, and a clear ring sounded out. A sparkling 100-meter-tall mountain of brilliant ice suddenly condensed around him, firmly blocking the incoming tides of lava. Upon this, the flood dragon blurred and reduced his body to a mere 3 meters in length. As soon as that happened, the beast ceased spewing lava and shot towards Han Li in a scarlet streak. He traveled 60 meters in the blink of an eye and began to swipe its claws down. Now that the flood dragon saw that its inferno was ineffective against Han Li, he planned on striking him down with his claws. When the scarlet flame flood dragon approached him, Han Li smiled. His sleeve trembled and a red light flew out before disappearing without a trace. Afterwards, thunder rang out from behind him, followed by the appearance of a pair of silver-white wings on his back. In a flare of silver light, Han Li disappeared just as the flood dragon's scarlet claws were about to strike him. Before he could recover from the missed attack, he heard a soft yet sharp shriek. As silent as it was swift, a translucent red needle arrived next to the flood dragon and was about to pierce through its head. It was the needle that Han Li had refined from crystallized demon core. Currently, the only thing protecting the flood dragon were the flames surrounding its body. When the scarlet flood dragon finally saw the needle arrive at his side, he felt engulfed in terror. Given no time to react, he could only twist his head to the side, but he was far too slow. Hiss! He let out a cry of agony, let out and covered his face with his claw as blood freely flowed from it. The flying needle had left behind a hole in his face. While the needle was incredibly sharp, it didn't have the power to sever injure the flood dragon. So in the instant the needle pierced through, he mentally commanded it to immediately expand several times in size, multiplying the damage of the wound. Before the flood dragon could rampage, he could hear a clap of thunder behind him, followed by the appearance of Han Li. He had waved his arm and released a 3-meter-long golden streak directly towards him. The scarlet flood dragon's mood sank, and he ignored the pain on his face. His tail flickered with light and grew several times in size before fiercely sweeping it at Han Li with reckless abandon, hoping to crush him first. Han Li then frowned. As expected of a worldly spiritual beast, he was extremely quick to react, unlike ordinary human cultivators who were helpless in the face of his lightning movement ambushes. With a mental command, the golden sword streak shifted direction to cleave through the flood dragon's tail. It had split through the red light surrounding the tail without resistance. The flood dragon felt his heart tremble at the sight, and he hastily gathered the entirety of his spiritual power into his tail scales, turning them into shining red crystals. Bang! Golden and scarlet light intertwined in a blinding display, forcing Han Li to close his eyes. It was only after employing the bright sight eyes that he was able to glimpse at what was happening. The golden sword condensed from several of his flying swords wasn't enough to cleanly sever the flood dragon's tail. Instead, It had only managed to break through the scales and cut a third of the way through before being firmly stopped by bone. Han Li narrowed his eyes and held his hands in an incantation gesture, commanding the flying sword to withdraw. However, the flood dragon's tail exerted immense strength and firmly held the sword in place. "Let's see how long you'll last without your magic treasure." The flood dragon wildly laughed and opened his mouth, spitting out a fist-sized pearl in a flash of red light. His demon core. Han Li narrowed his eyes as soon as he saw it. The flood dragon knew he was at a disadvantage and steeled his heart, using this as an opportunity to trap the magic treasure and launch a counterattack. Han Li's expression contorted in disbelief, and he loudly yelled, blurring and splitting into 3 exact copies of himself, putting the flood dragon at a loss. Before he could recognize which Han Li was genuine, the 3 copies all tossed their sleeve with a sneer, each releasing a meter-long golden sword streak. In furious alarm, he could only hastily deploy his demon core at the center attack and brandish his glowing claws to meet the 2 others at either side. Although he already saw the incisiveness of Han Li's flying swords, he had no way of recognizing which of the 3 attacks were real. If his demon core could block the true strike, his life would be guaranteed. But if he missed, he could temporarily block it with his claws, as they were even harder than his tail, and use his demon core in the meantime to destroy him. Just as these thoughts appeared in his mind, a deafening impact sounded out. The demon core had clashed against the golden sword streak in a flash of red light and was pushed 10 meters back. So it was the middle sword, the flood dragon happily thought. However, the 2 other sword streaks brilliantly flashed beside him, and he felt an unbearable pain afflict his claws as they cleanly cut through and continued towards his body. The flood dragon let out a fierce scream, and his body flared with light as he attempted to dodge. However, purple flame quickly surged from beneath him in the shape of a lotus, enveloping him in a layer of frost. In that moment of delay, the 2 golden sword streaks burned with brilliant light before circling around the flood dragon's head. Swoosh! The flood dragon's head fell from his body. The dense scales on his neck hadn't offered the slightest resistance. With this, the other 2 clones had disappeared in a flicker of azure light. Before the final strike, Han Li had formed an incantation gesture inside of his sleeve, channeling most of his body's spiritual power into the 2 flying swords. As a result, the fearsome might of the infused auric essence had been fully displayed, and the swords carried forward with unyielding force. Just as the flood dragon's head tumbled off, Han Li pointed once more at the 2 sword streaks. With a crack of thunder, 2 dense bolts of lightning shot out from the swords, layering the flood dragon's corpse in a net. A red light suddenly appeared from the stump of its neck, revealing a miniature flood dragon that flew out in a panic, but it was caught by the net of lightning. Just as it thought to change the direction of its escape, the net quickly closed in and captured it. The flood dragon's soul was struck with terror, and it spat out strands of scarlet flame at the net with all its might in an attempt to break free. Han Li coldly snorted when he saw this. The net soon shrunk to an area of 3 meters. Unlike with nascent souls, he didn't plan on destroying the soul. He summoned a small jade bottle into his hand and beckoned to the lightning net. Countless strands began to unravel towards the center of the net, and despite its greatest attempts, the flood dragon's soul had nowhere to run. Soon, a fist-sized golden ball was weaved around it, completely restraining it. He then pointed the bottle in his hand to the golden ball, and a mist of white light flew out before drawing the golden ball inside. Han Li's expression finally relaxed. Although I only have some skill in the spirit apparition technique, it seems quite effective in a fight. It is no wonder Gold Mist Mountain carries it as their legacy technique, Han Li muttered. He reached out to the still-blazing flood dragon corpse and recalled the golden sword stuck in its tail. Afterwards, he kept the head and the rest in the corpse in a storage pouch he specially prepared. As for the masterless Grade 8 demon core, Han Li had carefully put it away in a jade box before turning his attention to the sea of flame and demon clouds surrounding him. Without the flood dragon's magic power to sustain it, it was gradually scattering away. He took advantage of this opportunity to look at how the other battles were going, and he unconsciously frowned. The core formation cultivators were doing well enough since they had a numbers advantage against the Grade 7 flood dragons. However, their nascent soul stage leader was at a great disadvantage and appeared to be on the verge of defeat. An icy glint flashed from his eyes and he muttered, "Grade 8 demon beasts are rarely encountered. I may as well take the second one." Han Li's body began to spark with azure light, intending to interfere with the battle. Monarch's soul divergence hurriedly sent a voice transmission. Youngster Han, don't get carried away by greed. I've already sensed others on their way. If you delay, you won't be able to escape. The South Sea Sect had spent an enormous amount of resources to slay these flood dragons. They won't easily let you go with the Grade 8 flood dragon in your possession. In his surprise, Han Li quickly verified this with his spiritual sense and sullenly said, the South Sea Sect have already arrived. They act quickly. What a pity, let's go then. Before the final traces of the demon cloud faded away, Han Li could no longer be seen. When the blue Grade 8 flood dragon sensed the fall of the scarlet flame flood dragon, it had thrown itself into the battle with reckless abandon, putting the already pressured party leader into an immediate crisis. The large man inwardly cursed and was about to flee. But then, two flashes of light lit up from the horizon, followed by two squads of cultivators. They were flying in their direction with their utmost speed. When the blue flood dragon saw this, it knew that matters had turned for the worse and immediately suppressed the fury in its heart. It let out a fierce scream before delving into the sea below. When the other flood dragons heard this, they also attempted to escape. However, the cultivators weren't about to allow them to easily escape, and they tangled with them further, preventing their retreat. For a time, the battle became even more fierce and violent. Han Li had no interest in what happened, and simply flew deep into the ocean. He wanted to find an uninhabited spirit island, so that he could begin to refine Monarch Soul Divergence's puppet. Han Li had already bought a map of the sea in advance. He followed a path that cultivators rarely traveled and found a small, uninhabited island a month later. The island was only 20 square kilometers and had a small, unremarkable spirit vein that spanned 4 kilometers. If the spirit vein was closer to the mainland, it would be certainly occupied by a small clan, but no small clan would dare to move into the sea where demon beasts roamed with the vein's current location. As for the higher-grade cultivators from larger clans, they would find the spirit vein to be of little interest. Additionally, the island wasn't near any traveled sea route and was far from any human contact. Han Li found the island to be quite satisfactory and immediately flew to a small mountain at the center, releasing his flying swords to cut a flat surface before summoning his hidden fortune mansion on top of it. In just a moment, it expanded into a small, exquisite immortal abode. For the sake of carefulness, Han Li placed a concealment formation not only around the residence, but he also placed one around the small mountain, summoning a white mist 5 kilometers surrounding it. With these preparations done, he then placed his medicinal plants and spirit beasts inside their appropriate rooms. He also put the armored earth dragon under a restriction before placing it into one of the beast rooms. As for the large number of materials he carried, he put them all in his hidden chamber. After Han Li entered, he took off the bamboo tube from his back and placed it in front of him, calmly saying, "These materials are only enough for one attempt. If there are any errors during the refinement process, there won't be enough time to find a substitution. I also have no grasp on the chances of success." Monarch Soul Divergence replied, "I'm well aware. Before you refine it, I will give you a detailed explanation of the refinement process and repeatedly test your understanding after. Only once you've truly grasped the process will I have you start. Before we start, you should take a look at this jade slip. It has some general information about my puppet." A white jade slip flew out from the bamboo tube with a slight bang and into Han Li's grasp. "Since Senior has thought much over the matter, I am relieved." Han Li nodded and then promptly sat down before immersing his spiritual sense into the jade slip. As time slowly passed by, Han Li's expression continued to change from amazement to excitement and finally, complete shock. After an unknown amount of time, Han Li let out a long sigh and withdrew his spiritual sense from the jade slip, even though he continued to sit in place as his mind wandered. After a quarter hour, he finally opened his eyes and muttered, "Not bad. If I succeed in refining this puppet, its might will be unrivaled. Provided enough spirit stones, it will be able to rival a late nascent soul cultivator. However, there is something I'm unsure of." Monarch Soul Divergence promptly said, "Since I've already given the puppet formula to you, there is no point in being reserved. Go ahead and ask." And Li frowned and solemnly said, "In that case, I'll be blunt. According to the puppet formulas I've learned in the past, the higher the grade of the puppet, the stronger the soul that is needed to fuse with it. But I feel that a demon beast's soul isn't suitable for a puppet of this strength. Even the grade 8 Scarlet Flood Dragon's soul won't be enough to use it, and I'm left somewhat confused since Senior never mentioned the matter of a soul before. Could it be that you have something else in mind?" Monarch Soul Divergence chuckled and said, "So it was that. I also had this problem when I was researching it. I was already planning on giving you an explanation on this, or you wouldn't be able to refine the puppet with confidence." Hanli let out a dry laugh and casually said, "Senior must be joking. To display the true might of this puppet, it will require the soul of a grade 9 demon beast. I truly doubt Senior has a way to resolve this." With this question still in mind, Hanli grew vigilant. He wasn't about to abandon his ever-cautious attitude because of his relationship with Monarch Soul Divergence as both student and friend. With a deep voice, Monarch Soul Divergence nonchalantly said, "There is no need for any demon beast soul. When the time comes, just use my soul to refine the puppet." "Use Senior's soul," Hanli spoke with a tone of complete shock. Monarch Soul Divergence indifferently said, "What? Do you think my soul is inferior to that of a grade 9 demon beast?" "Of course not," Hanli hesitantly said. "Senior originally had the cultivation of late nascent soul stage and cultivated the great development techniques as well. Your spiritual sense would rival even that of a deity transformation cultivator. But do you have no intention of reincarnating? Once your soul is fused with the puppet, you'll lose your sense of self." Monarch Soul Divergence chuckled and boldly answered, "Of course I plan on reincarnating, but there is no guarantee I'll set foot on the path of cultivation once more." "What do you mean? If I understand correctly, Senior plans to fuse his soul with the puppet but is unwilling to lose his chance at reincarnating. Could it be that Senior has a technique that can accomplish this?" Monarch Soul Divergence clearly explained, "Youngster Han, that is exactly right. Because I used the soul attachment technique to a puppet, I was trapped for thousands of years and had little else to do but research a method that would be able to use a soul's power to control a puppet rather than magic power. That research had resulted in failure, but I had discovered a technique to divide one's soul in the process. This soul division technique is quite different from ordinary soul splitting techniques. This is genuine division of one's soul. When the time comes, I will split my soul into two. One of the halves will carry a majority of my soul's power and will be fused into the puppet. The other half will carry my memories and emotions, allowing me to enter the cycle of reincarnation once it disperses." When Hanli heard this, he astonishedly said, "But will that method be appropriate? Dividing one's soul can't be easy." "Don't worry," Monarch Soul Divergence reassured. "I will only be dividing the power of my soul. It won't obstruct the cycle of reincarnation. The strength of my soul would dissipate regardless if I were to simply die from age." "So it was like that. Then I am relieved." After some thought, Hanli had no further questions and nodded with reassurance. "Good. Now that there are no problems, I will begin to explain the various refinement process of each of the parts and areas you should take particular note of. I will first explain the puppet's body. It consists of a dozen core parts and their required materials are." With roused spirits, Hanli completely focused on the explanation. As time slowly passed by, he rarely emerged from the hidden chamber and would control his huge ape puppets to handle the affairs in the mansion, such as the taking care of the medicinal plants and spirit beasts. The dozen six-winged frost centipedes were not only fed more rainbow skirt grass, but in a flash of insight, Hanli decided to have them fed snow soul pills. After all, the pills had a great effect on his purple apex flames and should also have an effect on the centipedes, frost chi. As a result, Hanli discovered that while he needed 4 months to refine a single snow soul pill, the centipedes only needed 1. Furthermore, there was a clear improvement in the power of their glacial chi, much to Hanli's delight. Leaving behind the snow soul pills for his own use, he had his ape puppets feed the rest to the centipedes. As for the gold-devouring beetles, he continuously fed them with rainbow skirt grass. Although they hadn't displayed the slightest change during this time, Hanli could only be patient and wait. One day, he had just finished refining one of the puppet parts and had arranged an assortment of materials in front of him as per Monarch Soul Divergence's directions. His face wore an odd expression. "You said these items will enter the puppet?" Hanli asked with a frown. Monarch Soul Divergence calmly said, "That's right. I've only recently thought of using them. They will definitely increase the puppet's power by an entire level." Hanli raised his hand and pointed to 2 of the materials. With slight confusion, he asked, "In the past, you did mention you could refine the Devil Essence diamonds into a weapon, but I don't understand why you'd use these other 2 materials. Even I have yet to understand how they can be used." The items he pointed to were the silver chains that had been used to restrain the cadaver demon, and the unremarkable stone tablet fragments that he found in the abyss of devilish chi. "As you've said, I had thought of a way to use the devil essence diamonds when you found them. Although I've said that this is the sole material used to refine a devil dragon blade, it will be greatly powerful if used to refine a different devil Dao treasure. I've now thought of a treasure that can be refined and is suitable to act as the puppet's killing move. When you mentioned that these chains can block the attack of flying swords infused with auric essence, my heart had stirred. Although I didn't know what they were refined from, they are infused with a bit of tailstar silver. It can be used as a protective shield for the puppet. As for the stone fragments, I've just realized what they were a few days ago. After saying this with a heavy tone, Monarch's Soul Divergence paused. Monarch Soul Divergence's voice eventually broke the silence, and he deeply said, "Have you ever heard of divine flow clay?" Henley looked at the stone with surprise. "Of course I have. It's also known as illusory paste, a rare material used to refine complicated magic tools, and is said to be able to create any artifact. It also has the unique property of restoring any damage that it suffers. Could this unremarkable thing be it? I've heard that divine flow clay was white and as smooth as jade." Youngster Han, don't be alarmed. This is truly divine flow clay. However, ancient cultivators had mixed it with something else, and had peculiarly refined it into something known to them as flexile spirit jade. Those that can recognize this material can't number more than a dozen. I had found some information regarding this in an ancient cultivator residence and have long forgotten it. Have I not been reminded of something similar to it, I wouldn't have remembered. And Lee pensively asked, "Flexile spirit jade, what's the difference between that and divine flow clay?" Hadn't you already discovered it? Not only will this material recover from deformation, but it can absorb the magic power of a cultivator's strike. If an attack condensed with spiritual power were to damage it, it will decrease more than half the injury. The sole weak point is that the clay doesn't offer any additional defensive power against direct attacks, but even so, its value is still no lesser than auric essence. And Lee smiled when he heard this and asked, "So it was like that. Senior plans on weaving the divine flow clay into the puppet's body. Isn't it obvious? When the puppet's body is fused with tailstar silver and divine flow clay, it will require no defensive treasures. There will be hardly anyone in this world that will be able to easily destroy it," Monarch Soul Divergence proudly said. "Then let's do it," Han Li spoke without the slightest hesitation. "Yes, but for now, let's set it aside and refine the other puppet parts first. I reckon that we'll be finished with all the parts in a year." "All right," Han Li agreed. With a wave of his sleeve, he swept away all the items in a mist of azure light. Afterwards, he slapped his storage pouch and took out 8 jade boxes storing different materials before starting to refine another puppet part. In the eyes of a cultivator, a year was merely a moment. Apart from Han Li refining the puppet parts during this time, his 6-winged frost centipedes had suddenly evolved after consistently taking a snow soul pill every month. After they molted, their bodies grew several times larger and developed yet another pair of wings. Not only did their speed greatly increase, but they were far more nimble as well. But after they evolved, the pills were no longer effective. It appeared their next evolution was still far away. One day, Han Li was inside the hidden chamber with closed eyes, and a sparkling silver puppet floated in the air in front of him. His fingers continuously shifted, each of them connected to a different part of the puppet by a golden thread. Slowly revolving a foot above the silver puppet's head was a bamboo tube that faintly glowed with green light. After an unknown amount of time, his expression stirred and fingers came to a stop before eventually opening his eyes. "It appears there are no problems. The puppet has been fused to perfection. It is very surprising that I was able to so smoothly join it together." Han Li stared at the puppet in front of him and revealed a trace of joy. Monarch Soul Divergence's voice sounded out from the tube. "That puppet is something that I had researched, and with my instructions, there isn't a single possibility of a mistake. Now that everything else is finished, we can begin the soul fusion." "Well, Senior, reconsider. This is the first time you're using this soul division technique. It could greatly influence the possibility of your reincarnation if it goes awry, and will your soul be able to persist after you split it?" Monarch Soul Divergence softly chuckled and casually said, "I've spent most of my life dedicated to the art of puppets. I'm perfectly willing for my soul to become one, and even if I don't use this soul-splitting technique, the end of my lifespan will soon approach. I've also already given you the remaining layers of the Great Development Technique. I hope you will succeed it and pass it on to a new generation." When Han Li heard this, he tensely frowned and let out a long sigh. "Since Senior has resolved himself, I won't say any more. I hope for your success." Monarch Soul Divergence now heartily laughed. and a green light suddenly emerged from the bamboo tube, splitting it in half to reveal a small silhouette glowing with golden light. This small silhouette was a puppet that was several inches tall. It was intricately detailed and made of a material that was neither wood nor gold, modeled after a middle-aged man with a refined appearance. Green light shined from the eyes of this miniature man, and then it sat down cross-legged. As soon as it muttered an incantation, a speck of green light flew out of its mouth and expanded to the size of a fist, then floating back onto the miniature man. When Han Li saw this, his lips opened but no sound came out. Monarch's soul divergence began to utter the spell with greater speed, and the green light grew ever brighter. Han Li squinted at the sight and was forced to use his bright sight spirit eyes. Then Monarch's soul divergence let out a scream of agony, causing the hidden chamber to tremble. As Han Li watched with amazement, the light split in two. The larger ball of light flew towards the silver puppet and the smaller one flickered before flying into the miniature man's mouth. With the green light faded away, the miniature man returned into view, but this time it had a slumped head and the eyes shined ever dimmer. Han Li didn't dare to delay. He flicked his fingers at the puppet, had its mouth open, and drew in the ball of green light with silver threads. Afterwards, the puppet glowed with silver light and its body began to tremble. His face sank and he spat out a stream of purple flame, striking at the puppet. With a loud crackle, a dense layer of ice spread across and firmly sealed it in place. He had now sighed with relief, but worry appeared on his face as he raised his head to look at the miniature man in the air. So this is what it feels like to divide one's soul. How incredible! I suspect I am the only cultivator in the entire world to experience this feeling. Monarch's soul divergence's wild cackle suddenly sounded out from the small puppet, but his voice sounded quite weak as if he were extremely ill. Han Li couldn't help but ask, "Senior, are you all right?" "Don't worry," Monarch's soul divergence reassured him with an excited tone. "Although I won't last long, I'll still be able to persist for half a month. Quickly now, fuse the soul to the puppet and allow me to witness its true might before I pass." Han Li raised his brow and said, "Of course, but before that, I'll use a soul-concentrating talisman to help stabilize Senior's remaining soul." Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he released a crimson talisman. A soul-concentrating talisman, how rare! It is a bit of a waste to use it on someone who is about to perish. With a tremble of his wrist, the crimson talisman glowed with light and struck the small puppet. A red mist suddenly burst out and was quickly drawn into it. Han Li then calmly said, "This is something I've acquired from the storage pouch of a nascent soul cultivator I killed. Precious as it may be, I didn't spend any effort to acquire it and may as well make use of it." With a stronger voice, Monarch's soul divergence said in an odd tone, "Not bad, I feel quite better, but don't expect me to repay you. I'm only repaying the help you gave me in the past." Monarch's soul divergence snorted several times and then beckoned to the two halves of the bamboo tube. With a rustle of air, they shot towards him and closed around him once more. Afterwards, it floated back to Han Li's side. Han Li didn't say anything further and beckoned to the large chunk of ice. Purple light flashed from it, and the frost covering the puppet began to thaw. He sat again on the ground cross-legged and slapped the top of his head. In a flash of azure light, a nascent soul emerged and flew over to the puppet. 3 months later, Han Li emerged from the desolate island and streaked across the air in azure light. Bitter Bamboo Island was a small obscure isle in the nearby seas of the Great Jin, and was surrounded in blue mist all year long. The island's master was Old Man Bitter Bamboo. Although he wasn't widely famous in the mainland's cultivation world, a few mid and late nascent soul eccentrics on the continent held him in fear. To those overseas, he was particularly famous. Although he was only a mid-nascent soul cultivator, he had over 365 glacial bitter bamboo swords created from the divine mulberry tree on the island, and was held at the same level as the 3 great overseas cultivators. On Bitter Bamboo Island, the divine mulberry tree served as the center of a grand formation that consisted of over 10,000 trees. The formation itself was quite wondrous, and its reputation widespread amongst overseas cultivators for tens of thousands of years, as one of the many fantastical ancient formations that still existed. Even if a late nascent soul cultivator was to intrude, their abilities would be greatly weakened. One day, however, an uninvited guest appeared near the island. Light flashed in the distant sky, followed by a streak of azure tearing through the sky like a bolt of lightning, arriving 50 kilometers away from an island covered in mist. The light faded away to reveal a youth wearing Confucian robes and carrying a bamboo tube on his back. Han Li looked down at the mist, but his vision was completely concealed. He raised his brow and tried once more with blue light flashing from his eyes. A moment later, his expression became sullen. He muttered, "The grand myriad tree formation is worthy of its reputation. Even with the use of my bright-sight spirit eyes, I can't see through their restrictions. Of course, this trip will make a great target to test the puppet's strength. Not only is Old Man Bitter Bamboo an optimal opponent, but you also need the tail feathers of their black phoenix for the trifling fan." Monarch Soul Divergence's weak voice sounded out from the bamboo tube. Ever since he had performed the Soul Division, his strength had been on the decline. Han Li worriedly asked, "Exactly, but will you be able to persist?" Monarch Soul Divergence softly chuckled. "Don't worry, with the aid of the Soul Concentrating Talisman, I won't easily pass away from this world before seeing the true might of this puppet." Han Li nodded and looked down once again. He narrowed his eyes and slapped a storage pouch at his waist. Then, in the glow of azure light, a pale middle-aged cultivator with a stature similar to Han Li appeared. The cultivator wore yellow robes and had impeccably smooth skin. Under closer inspection, it had a clear resemblance to the miniature puppet that Monarch Soul Divergence housed himself in, but the eyes glinted with cold light and its expression was void of emotion. Although Han Li had seen this puppet many times before, he couldn't help but take another look. The flexile spirit Jade was truly miraculous and created the appearance of a lifelike person. Under Monarch Soul Divergence's refinement instructions, the gray stone had turned into the color of flesh and was fused with Tailstar Silver to become the puppet's outer shell. Because flexile spirit Jade could change shape, one could place a thread of spiritual sense inside and control the puppet to speak and change appearance. However, there was one glaring problem with using the puppet. Full use of its abilities for repeated attacks could only be sustained with high-grade spirit stones for a puppet as grand as this, but they were incredibly rare. Though they are all in high demand in every market, Han Li was able to gather a few of them. He reckoned that if it were to attack in full force, it would consume one high-grade spirit stone in a quarter hour. "Let's begin," Han Li calmly said. Since the puppet had been refined, it needed to be tested. The puppet raised its hands and spread out its fingers, immediately gathering mists of blue light around each palm. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into huge blinding spheres that carried an astonishing pressure. With a flick of its wrists, the light spheres shot forward in a line and disappeared deep into the mist. Han Li expressionlessly glanced down in silence. Shortly after, a world-shaking eruption burst out, and the calm mist now wildly surged. Two broad pillars of wind erupted into the sky and wildly wreaked havoc, scattering 300 meters of the mist around them like a storm. The surrounding winds howled furiously in rage as they blew. Han Li took advantage of the chaos and looked again, faintly catching sight of a large island. A barrier of green light appeared above it and seemed to cover most of it. A dozen streaks of various colored light then flew directly towards them without restraint. It was clear that the attack had alarmed the cultivators on the island. Han Li examined them and saw that there was a large disparity of power among them. They ranged from foundation establishment to core formation stage and were being led by a late core formation cultivator. "Who are you two? Why have you ye? May I ask why you two seniors have paid our island a visit?" When the old man arrived, he originally thought to rebuke and interrogate them, but when their leader swept his spiritual sense past Han Li, he discovered he possessed mid-nascent soul cultivation, much like his master. When he wasn't able to see through the other's cultivation especially, he felt his heart drop and his tone quickly changed. Han Li blinked and smiled, saying, "I've long heard of fellow Taoist Bamboo's famous reputation and decided to pay him a visit. Could you make a report?" The old man in charge was surprised and then also smiled. "That is unfortunate. The master had entered seclusion several years prior and cannot meet with guests. If you two seniors have any important requests, can you first mention them to me? The matters of Bitter Bamboo Island have been left in my charge." Han Li calmly said, "Fellow Taoist Bitter Bamboo is in seclusion. What a pity, but it'll be fine since you can handle it. I heard that your esteemed island was nurturing a black phoenix, is this true?" The old man felt his heart tremble. What does senior mean? With an unchanged expression, Han Li calmly said, "It's nothing much. I just want to refine a treasure that will require 3 of its tail feathers. I'm willing to trade a grade 7 and 3 grade 6 demon cores. Are you willing to agree?" After that, he summoned 4 jade boxes in front of him with a sweep of his sleeve. He casually pointed to each of them, and they opened to reveal 4 various-colored demon cores, with one of them slightly larger than the others. "Exchange these for phoenix feathers," the old man asked with confusion. As Han Li's request was beyond his expectations, he couldn't help but feel at a loss. Han Li's smile faded to reveal a solemn expression. "That's right. Your Black Phoenix should be a grade 7 demon beast. It should be a fair trade with this many demon cores and show that my intentions are sincere." The old man's expression wavered for a long while before eventually shaking his head. "These demon cores would be more than enough for the trade. However, this isn't something that I can decide." When Han Li heard this, his face turned cold as he silently glared at the old man. When he saw that Han Li appeared angered, his heart sank and hastily explained, "Please don't misunderstand, Senior. I do mean you any disrespect, but the Black Phoenix is undergoing a crucial point in its cultivation. We cannot do anything that would harm it. So it was like that, but I cannot give up on those feathers. How about this? I'll add another grade 7 demon core to compensate you for your loss." Han Li frowned and then took out another jade box. The Bitter Bamboo Island cultivators then looked at each other in dismay. "What, are you still unwilling to accept?" Han Li gloomily sighed and then looked at those present with an icy expression. The old man trembled under Han Li's frigid gaze. After taking another glance at the unknown cultivator at Han Li's side, he eventually gritted his teeth and said, "Since this matter is so incredibly important, I truly cannot make the decision. Please wait a moment. I will take upon the risk of offending the master and send him a message. Let us wait for his reply. If he handled this improperly or ended up provoking a powerful enemy, he would be punished regardless." "Good, I'll wait." Han Li nodded and his face relaxed. As a result, the old man made certain of the details and then released the voice transmission talisman back to the island. Knowing the vast cultivation of the 2 cultivators, he had no other choice but to disturb his master. Han Li didn't wait for long. As he examined the restrictions on the island, he heard an aged voice echo out. "So it was a nascent soul stage fellow Taoist that has paid a visit. I hope you'll forgive me for not coming out personally to greet you." With that said, Old Man Bamboo then commanded his disciples, "Bring them to the Phoenix Pavilion. I'll come shortly." The old man hastily bowed in salute and respectfully replied, "As you command, master." Then he turned and smiled, "Seniors, please follow me. The master has agreed to meet you." Han Li glanced around and said with an unchanged tone, "Good, I was interested in taking a look at this well-renowned island." Afterwards, he descended with the puppet in tow. With the assistance of the late nascent soul stage puppet, Han Li reckoned they wouldn't be able to restrain him, even if they activated the myriad tree formation. In the blink of an eye, the party flew into the island through an opening in the barrier. As soon as Han Li entered, he suddenly felt a wave of spiritual qi immerse his senses. He looked down below at the large verdant trees, seeing them grow up to heights of over 100 meters. There were a large variety, including those that were rarely ever seen. Among them, there were a dozen that were clearly larger than the others, mulberry trees that were a bizarre purple. They were strangely arranged throughout the island, presumably in accordance with Taoist principles. Han Li frowned and suddenly asked the old man, "These are your island's divine mulberry trees. Wasn't there only said to be one? How can there be a dozen?" The old man stole a few glances at the unknown cultivator and silently thought, why has he never spoken or face moved? Could he possess a peculiar character? Since the topic of the tree wasn't a kept secret, the old man explained, "These divine mulberry trees all stem from the same roots, so they are considered to be the same." Han Li clicked his tongue in awe. That is quite eye-opening. It is said that the divine mulberry tree is only exceeded by the 3 great divine trees. Afterwards, Han Li followed the cultivator to an area seemingly filled with trees, and suddenly felt the nearby spiritual qi shake. The scene before him blurred and massively changed, revealing a kilometer-tall mountain. Surrounding the mountain were buildings of various sizes, with a few cultivators darting back and forth between them. "You all can go ahead and attend to your own matters," the old man commanded the other cultivators. He then turned to Han Li and said, "Seniors, please follow me." They followed the old man to the top of the mountain, where there was a huge hall carved out of a giant tree. There were 4 cultivators wearing green armor outside of the hall, each of them with a halberd in hand. When the old man brought Han Li to the entrance, the 4 remained completely still as if they were statues. Han Li curled his lips and felt a bit of surprise. Although they were only Foundation establishment cultivators, The wood spiritual chi their body emitted was the purest he had ever seen from a cultivator of their grade, and their equipment were all top-grade wood attribute spiritual tools. It was a remarkable sight. As if having seen through Han Li's surprise, the old man smiled and took the initiative to explain. These four are our wood spirit soldiers who were personally trained by the master with the aid of the divine mulberry tree's power, and they cultivate a peculiar art. Although their cultivation isn't high, they are skilled in joint attacks. If Senior has the opportunity, you could give them some pointers. Han Li nodded and said, they truly are unordinary cultivators. When the old man saw that Han Li appeared indifferent, he tactfully dropped the matter and they entered the hall. The wood hall wasn't a complex structure. Apart from the main room, there was only one side chamber. As soon as they entered, they found a tall man standing with his back turned to them. He wore long green robes and had snow-white hair. When the old man saw this person, he deeply bowed with a solemn expression and silently stood in place. Han Li stared at the man and asked, "Are you old man Bitter Bamboo?" The green-robed man chuckled and turned around. "That's right. You are quite unfamiliar to me, though. Since you've dared to ask of my name, you fellow Taoists must be from the mainland." Han Li narrowed his eyes when he saw this person. He had a young and handsome face that belonged to someone in their early 20s, but there was a faint layer of green chi surrounding his face. Han Li was quite shocked as he expected to meet an old man with a face full of wrinkles. This old man Bitter Bamboo was like himself. His appearance was halted through the use of some sort of technique. Although he was smiling when he saw Han Li, a peculiar emotion was betrayed from his eyes. Han Li politely said, "In truth, we aren't cultivators from overseas. My surname is Han and this is my senior martial brother Li. I hope you won't take offense at how I've boldly paid you a visit." Old man Bitter Bamboo examined them both and smiled, saying, "So it was like that. I would have welcomed you if I could. Fellow Taoist Li's cultivation is particularly profound. I can't even determine it. It is quite eye-opening." Han Li smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Bitter Bamboo is too modest. Your reputation is resounding throughout the land." Old man Bitter Bamboo chuckled and said, "How about you two first try our island's unique mulberry tea before we begin any talks?" Afterwards, he curtly clapped his hand, and several young female cultivators walked in with a tea set. After steeping a cup of a faint green tea for each of the cultivators, they respectfully took their leave. Han Li lowered his head to look at the tea on the table and saw that it was filled with wood spiritual chi. With a shifting air, he asked, "Does this tea have anything to do with your divine mulberry tree?" Old man Bitter Bamboo proudly said, "Fellow Taoist is quite perceptive. The tea is infused with the leaves of the divine mulberry tree and has quite an effect on clearing the mind. There is no other such tea in any place in the world." "I truly have to taste it then." After sweeping his spiritual sense past the tea, Han Li found no problem with it and took a sip. When old man Bitter Bamboo saw the other cultivator sitting there without drinking the tea, he asked with an odd expression, "Fellow Taoist Li, do you not like tea?" In a voice lacking any emotion, the puppet said, "Ever since I've begun fasting, I've never partaken in any food or drink outside of my cave residence." "Ah, it seems I've been quite imprudent." Old man Bamboo betrayed a trace of annoyance on his face, but he quickly concealed it. Since this eccentric dared to act this way in front of me, he must be confident in his abilities. Could it be that he is actually a late nascent soul cultivator? As these thoughts appeared in his mind, he felt a trace of fear towards this person. After taking a few more sips of the tea, Han Li put down the cup and asked, "Fellow Taoist Bamboo should know our reason for coming. What do you think about my proposal?" With an unsightly expression, old man Bitter Bamboo frowned and shortly grimaced. "I'll be honest. This trade is quite difficult for me. The Black Phoenix is currently at a crucial moment in its growth. I am unwilling to agree to the exchange, no matter how many demon cores you offer. Who knows if there will ever come a time that the Phoenix will have another breakthrough." "Then you mean to say that you don't agree?" Han Li pursed his lips, but he wasn't surprised to hear this in the slightest. If I truly refused you to, I fear that you would be unwilling to return empty-handed. How about this? As cultivators as powerful as we are, how about we compare a few of our techniques? If one of you are able to defeat me in battle, I may be willing to agree to the trade, but if not, we will immediately leave and never mention this matter again," Han Li said without hesitation. Old man Bitter Bamboo swept his gaze past the two and mysteriously smiled. "Good, it is settled then. I haven't had a measure of strength in nearly 100 years. Which one of you will I be fighting? Under Han Li's control, he willed the puppet to say, if you find it acceptable, how about sparring with me? That's fine. I'm also quite curious to see Brother Li's techniques. We will compare pointers above the mountain, come. When Old Man Bitter Bamboo saw that his opponent would be the man with the mysterious cultivation, he solemnly stood up from his chair. Han Li and the puppet followed after him. The old steward that had remained silent this entire time couldn't help but reveal an excited expression. A battle between nascent soul cultivators wasn't something that was often seen. Soon, Han Li was floating over 300 meters above the mountain and wore a calm expression. He stood 100 meters away from Old Man Bitter Bamboo and the puppet. In the air nearby, there were 8 additional core formation cultivators that were watching with wide-open eyes. Go, Old Man Bitter Bamboo shouted. He formed an incantation gesture, and a blinding light suddenly covered his body. Over 100 faint green flying swords were released around him in specks of light, filling the air with an astonishing pressure. The glowing swords flickered and arranged themselves in a strange formation. They then began to revolve above Old Man Bitter Bamboo, producing a strangely hostile intent. When Han Li saw this, his expression suddenly froze. Having refined so many flying swords, it is only natural for him to comprehend sword formation so well. Although he had already guessed as much, he was still shocked to see it with his own eyes. Monarch Soul Divergence clicked his tongue and excitedly said, Youngster Han, it seems this person has quite a bit of skill. This will allow the puppet to reveal even more of its powers. Let's first test the puppet's defensive abilities. His voice didn't carry a trace of doubt. Understood. Having used so many rare materials to refine it, Han Li was also excited to see what would happen, and he commanded the puppet to act. From a distance, he saw it open its mouth and spit out a palm-sized shield. In a flash of light, it transformed into a huge silver shield in front of it. In quick succession, the puppet formed an incantation gesture, and various colored talisman characters appeared in the air, condensing into a rainbow barrier covering both shield and body. Old Man Bitter Bamboo yelped when he saw this and asked, could you be Nanjiang of the Fierce Saint Sect? This ability appears similar to their sect's trademark spirit mark technique. Han Li's heart stirred when he heard this, but he commanded the puppet to curtly speak, no. An odd expression appeared on Old Man Bitter Bamboo's face, and then he replied, oh, so I was mistaken. However, there is an undeniable resemblance. It was clear he was doubtful. However, he didn't ask any further questions. When he saw that his opponent did nothing, he felt as if he was being underestimated. Annoyed, his expression turned sullen and he began to mutter an incantation. The hundreds of flying swords above him began to buzz and tremble before shooting out from the formation as 3-meter-long sword streaks, obscuring the sky with their barrage. They all combined into a huge ray of light en route, producing an astonishing pressure and dazzling radiance. To the incoming attack of swordlight, the puppet simply pointed to the silver shield in front of it and did nothing else. In a flare of light, the shield grew several times thicker before flying forward to meet the attack. The swordlight struck the silver luminescent shield with full force, resulting in a resounding explosion as flashes of white and green light coloring the sky. But the shield stood as firm as a mountain against the raging tide. Old Man Bitter Bamboo grimaced at the sight, and a trace of astonishment appeared on Han Li's face. Monarch Soul Divergence said in voice transmission, it appears the might of the Tailstar shield is above what was expected. Despite being a newly refined magic treasure and having yet been tempered, it has absolutely no problem blocking the strikes of ordinary magic treasures. However, I suspect only the puppet is able to bring out this degree of power. If you were to control the shield, you would only be able to display half as much might. And Li bluntly replied, of course, the degree of power one can display from a magic treasure depends on its might, the amount of time tempered, the total magic power channeled into it, as well as one's control of spiritual sense. Storing spiritual power as magic power is the foundation of cultivation. This puppet is refined from rare materials and can pour 3 times as much magic power into the shield than I can. Having spent so many days under Monarch Soul Divergence's personal guidance, his grasp of puppet techniques had reached a profoundly high level. Monarch Soul Divergence may still prove his superior by far in this regard, but there are no others in this world that could hope to best him in puppet techniques. Monarch Soul Divergence chuckled and added, although the Tailstar shield was something that you refined and gave to the puppet, it was created with its characteristics in mind. It is quite different from an ordinary magic treasure. Even if you channeled as much magic power into the shield, you still wouldn't be produce as much of its strength as the puppet. Han Li nodded and said little else, turning his attention back to the battle. At that moment, Old Man Bitter Bamboo gave his swords another order. Seeing that they were helpless in the face of that shield, he had them create another sword formation above his head in preparation for an attack. After pointing to the formation, the swords let out a ring and began to spin around in the air. In a flash of light, they formed a 3-meter-wide wheel. He struck the wheel with several spell seals, causing it to rotate with increasing speed. Blinding green light then blazed at its center and concentrated in a beam of energy, fiercely striking at the silver shield. A muffled bang sounded out, and a ball of green light erupted from the shield. The ball was massive and caved in the center of the shield of light. The depression quickly grew deeper as if it were on the verge of collapse. At that moment, the puppet pointed to the shield, and it began scattering into specks of white light. Then, the huge ball continued its overbearing charge forward and directly struck the physical shield behind it. The silver shield trembled violently against the strike, but rather than shattering, it suddenly flowed with intermittent light, and the surface became reflective like a mirror. Under the silver glow, the ball of light intensely quaked and began to decompose into countless smaller balls, shrinking down to less than half its original size as they scattered away. Then the shield tilted and burst with silver light, repelling the remaining attack before it ruptured in the air and disappeared. Old Man Bitter Bamboo let out a deep sigh and was unable to conceal his shock. He stared at the puppet across from him with a grave expression. Although that previous strike hadn't displayed the sword formation's full might, the shield was still able to block such a heavy attack with ease, revealing an unfathomable defensive capability. As he pondered about activating the sword formation's final ability, hesitation lingered in his mind. Monarch Soul Divergence then said with a pleased tone, "All right, since the Tailstar shield is this powerful, the elemental barrier won't need to be tested. Created from the elemental Jade, its might won't be any lesser. Now let's test the puppet's attacks." "Got it," Han Li calmly replied. Purple light began to glow from the puppet's eyes, and it silently twisted its hands, producing a ball of faint red light. Then, in a blinding flash, it turned into a several-inch-long red bow. It had an exquisite appearance with the carving of a flood dragon and sparkling red scales. "A dragon-piercing bow," Old Man Bitter Bamboo immediately shouted. The puppet remained expressionless as it uttered, "This is a thunderfire bow, not a dragon-piercing bow. I must warn you that it's refined from the tendons of a flood dragon, and its might is even greater." The old man immediately felt his heart sink. Soon after, the puppet summoned an emerald-green arrow to its other hand in a clap of thunder. It quickly muttered an incantation, and the miniature bow and arrow began to brightly shine with light before expanding to a normal size. Talisman characters flickered on the surface of the bow as scarlet flames wrapped around it. As for the green arrow, it shined with golden light and released several arcs of lightning, followed by pangs of thunder. The puppet knocked the arrow and slowly pulled back the bowstring. Lightning and flames had already begun to fuse together around the arrow before release, letting out deafening booms. Then an overwhelming spiritual pressure was released from its body. When the distant core formation stage observers felt this spiritual wave, the air grew heavy as the light barriers protecting their bodies began to waver. Those with particularly weaker cultivation began to turn tail with fearful expressions. After sensing the puppet's spiritual chi, Old Man Bitter Bamboo paled and loudly shouted, "Stay your hand. The competition ends here. I forfeit." Although he said this, he hadn't overlooked his defenses. With a flip of his hand, a triangular pendant shot out and began to surge with green, red, and yellow light, forming a strange barrier in front of him. Then, he waved at the sword wheel spinning in the air, dissolving it and having them revolve around him in a protective formation. Han Li was surprised to see him take such drastic measures. He frowned, asking, "Is the might of the Thunderfire bow so great that it can inspire such fear?" With the massive spiritual power of a late nascent soul cultivator, any magic treasure would be fearsome. With the addition of a bow refined from the very bones and tendons of a scarlet flame flood dragon, your arrow refined from golden lightning bamboo, and the complex fusion of their powers, it is no surprise he felt such danger. After all, he isn't a late nascent soul cultivator. If you were to use the puppet's full power, there is a 40% chance of slaying him in a single strike. "You have an interest in killing him?" Monarch Soul Divergence asked with a cold laugh. Han Li inwardly shook his head and said, "Forget it. I'm not particularly interested in slaughter, and the Black Phoenix feathers take priority. If the strike fails to kill him and he activates the island's restrictions, it will be trouble. And given his grand reputation, he should have a method to preserve his life as well, and the attempt could spectacularly backfire. It seems we won't be able to test the puppet's true offensive power. Monarch's soul divergent sighed and muttered, "It is no matter. I've already personally witnessed the puppet easily suppress a cultivator at the peak of mid-nascent soul stage. It clearly illustrates that its abilities are no lesser than that of a late-nascent soul cultivator. I no longer have any regrets now that I know my life's efforts weren't wasted." When Han Li heard this, a trace of sadness was betrayed from his face. The astonishing spiritual chi from the puppet's body slowly disappeared. In a flash of light, the arrow and bow returned to their original size, and both elements had faded away. Old Man Bitter Bamboo was relieved to see this, but he still felt cold sweat line his back. In the instant he was targeted, he sensed that his life in danger and immediately conceded. From the abilities and spiritual pressure that his opponent had displayed, there was no longer any doubt that he was a late-nascent soul cultivator. It appears that it was a wise decision to come out of seclusion to deal with these people. He didn't believe that the island's myriad tree formation would be able to stop the wrath of a late-nascent soul eccentric, not to mention that he had a mid-nascent soul cultivator following him as well. He put away his own magic treasures as well, and then beckoned the two to meet him again at the tree hall. This time, he spoke to them with an exceptionally polite attitude. He handed a magic tool to his old steward and commanded him to pluck off several of the phoenix's feathers. Then, he began a chat with them to see if he could ask about their origins. After all, the puppet's appearance didn't match the description any of the late-nascent soul cultivators on the continent. While Han Li had a lively chat with Old Man Bitter Bamboo, the puppet remained deathly silent. After talking for a long while, the old man hadn't found any relevant information. He could only wryly laugh to himself as he was helpless to find any further information. A quarter-hour later, the steward came back with a jade box and respectfully presented it to his master. Old Man Bitter Bamboo glanced at the two visiting cultivators, and with a sweep of his sleeve, he tossed the box over to Han Li. He was now able to see that, although this cultivator Li seemed unwilling to deal with others, so he tactfully handed it over to Han Li. Han Li bluntly took the jade box and opened it to reveal a line of dazzling red feathers. After he examined them with a squint, he couldn't help but smile. Half a day later, Han Li and the puppet left Bitter Bamboo Island in two trails of light. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the nearby skies. 3 days later, Han Li appeared at a nameless island. He stood on a huge boulder on the shore and solemnly watched Monarch Soul, Divergence's small puppet body. Han Li slowly asked, "Does Senior truly wish to pass away of his own accord? I still have methods that can allow your soul to persist for another month or two." The miniature puppet shook its head and said, "What does a few more days matter to me? I don't want to trouble you in this matter. In that case, I won't say anything else. I hope you'll be able to reincarnate and have the opportunity to cultivate in your next life." How could the path of reincarnation be so easily tread? Even if I reincarnate, I might not take the body of a human. Ah yes, youngster Han, do you remember that you'd agree to one request since I researched the refinement process for the Triflame fan? Of course I remember. Do you think I'd forget if you hadn't mentioned it? Han Li said with a wry smile. Monarch Soul Divergent snorted. In that case I will make good use of it. My request is quite simple. If it is possible, I hope you will reclaim the 1,000 Bamboo School in the far west, take in a disciple on my behalf, and continue my legacy. Do not allow my teachings to die out. The current head of the school is not someone that had stemmed from my own personal disciples. I feel ill at ease over the matter. It is no problem, Han Li quickly replied. When the time comes, I will take in a talented disciple and teach them all of your puppet techniques. Later, I will have them become the 1,000 Bamboo Sect master. Monarch Soul Divergence bellowed with laughter. Your words have put my heart at ease. I've collected all my techniques, life's experiences, and knowledge into a set of jade slips I call the Great Development Treasure Scriptures. I've left them all in my heaven fortune cask. Learn as much of it as you can, and teach them to the succeeding disciples of the 1,000 Bamboo School. Only then will my legacy be truly passed on. A fist-sized ball of green light then shot out from the puppet body and soared to the skies. As a series of cryptic incantations sounded out from it, the light suddenly surged, quickly turning into a blinding 3-meter wide wheel 100 meters in the air, forcing Han Li to squint his eyes at the sight. Then the incantations came to a sudden halt and the area became silent. A quarter hour later, the wheel shrank and loudly ruptured, filling half of the sky with specks of green light in a marvelous display. Han Li sadly watched this funeral unfold. With this, the sect-establishing grandmaster known as the Monarch of Soul Divergence had passed away. He quietly peered upon sky for a long while, and drew a deep breath before lowering his gaze to find a lifeless small puppet floating in midair. After putting it away in a wind of azure light, he slapped the bamboo tube on his back and summoned several jade slips out from it. Han Li swept his spiritual sense through the jade slips and read that they did indeed contain the experiences of Monarch Soul Divergence's life, including many secret techniques as well as many strange secrets of the cultivation world. After a while, he put away the jade slips in his storage pouch and muttered to himself as he sank into thought. Now that the grand puppet was complete, the next step was to refine the triflame fan. Then, he should have enough strength to face the Elder Devil. However, the fan would be somewhat troublesome to create. He would need the assistance of the true flames of earth, heaven, and man. During his time at the 100 Possibilities Pavilion, he grew quite interested in their vein of earth-lung fire. In truth, he had wanted to use the flames to assist him in refining the materials, but now that he was in the Great Jinn, the matter was impossible. If he wanted to refine the materials that required earthfire, he'd have to find another pure reservoir. There were many in the Great Jinn and quite a few famous ones that didn't belong to any sect. Rather, these areas were easy to find, but they were desolate lands that lacked spiritual chi. As for flames of man, a true fire of any cultivator would do, including his nascent flame. The sole problem was finding the flames of heaven. According to the jade slip, the so-called heaven fire was the flames produced from heavenly lightning. It would require a violent storm, as he would be using the naturally occurring lightning in the refinement process. Even if he were to use a heavenly lightning bead, something that was refined from worldly lightning, it wouldn't require lightning, but that power turned into flame. So long as the conditions were fulfilled, he'd be able to refine all the materials in about 3 months. Then, the completion of the triflame fan would only be a matter of time. Additionally, he still had enough time to meet with the 9 Serenity Sect's Elder Wei at the Empire's south border. Although Han Li had agreed to his request with ulterior motives and didn't regard it with importance, there was a volcano at the southern border named Silver Snake Mountain. It erupted year-long and was a famous fire vein in the Great Jinn. Many cultivators would go there to refine their magic tools and treasures, allowing him to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He was also quite interested in the matter, given how seriously Elder Wei treated the request. To tell the truth, he had completed about half of his objectives in the Great Jinn. All that was left was for him to acquire the removal incantation for the Soul Seal Curse from the Yin Sifting Sect and seize back the 2 flying swords from the Elder Devil. Before then, he would have to refine another set of his flying swords with the new auric essence. After thinking about this for a long while, he settled on a plan of action, but there were still 2 matters he had to handle first. He promptly flew towards a small mountain range on the island and released his hidden fortune mansion on top of one. After placing down a few concealment formations, he entered his hidden chambers. 6 days later, he had taken in the spirit form talisman that he acquired into his body. With that done, he sat down cross-legged and flung a spirit beast pouch from his waist into the air. The bag opened, and white mist spilled out to reveal a meter-long yellow demon beast that resembled a pangolin. It was the armored earth dragon he acquired several years prior. The beast had various colored restriction talismans stuck all around its body, and its limbs were pierced with several sparkling golden needles, leaving it motionlessly lying on the floor. When Han Li released it, its eyes anxiously wandered, and it looked at Han Li with a miserable appearance. It appeared that these few years had greatly weakened the beast's unruliness. Han Li eerily said, "There is no need to play the fool, demon beast. You will agree to pay allegiance to me, release your spiritual senses of your own accord, and allow me to subject you to a soul restraint. Otherwise, I'll simply kill you. Your demon core and scales should fetch me a good price." When the armored earth dragon heard this, its body trembled and fear betrayed in its eyes. But then, it resentfully glared at him. Han Li looked at the beast and bluntly said, "I won't have you become an inherited spirit beast. You will only be under control during my lifetime. During this, if I perish or ascend to the next realm, you'll be freed. Since your lives are far longer than ours, this will only be a moment of your time." The dragon's gaze wavered and appeared to show hesitation. Han Li mysteriously smiled and slapped his storage pouch, summoning a small green bottle into his hand. Foosh! Purple flames ignited, enveloping the bottle and releasing its lid into the air. Then, a glacial mist quickly shot out and rapidly dropped the temperature in the room. When the dragon felt this glacial chi, its entire body began to tremble and astonishment appeared in its eyes. Han Li flicked his wrist, and a drop of silver liquid flew out from the bottle and quickly condensed into a pearl. Its eyes grew dull, and its nose began to twitch towards the pearl. Suddenly, bestial snarls began to leave its mouth as if in a show of excitement. Good, you recognize it. If you agree to become my spirit beast, I'll give you 2 drops of glacial quintessence, allowing you an opportunity to survive ascension tribulation. Now choose, Han Li coldly said. Though the dragon was tempted by the pearl, its face still twitched with hesitance. After a long while, the demon beast still didn't make any clear signs. Han Li snorted and then put the bottle away. Then, purple flames flickered from his hand and slowly condensed into the form of a sword. When the armored earth dragon sensed the sword's fearsome spiritual power, its expression shifted. Han Li then released the sword, causing the demon beast to scream out in terror and yelp out in submission. The 100 Possibilities Pavilion is a sect allied to the Drifting Cloud Sect and share the Dreamcloud Mountains with them alongside the Ancient Sword Sect in the Heavenly South. Han Li visited it when he fought against the Ancient Sword Sect's eccentric Jin in Chapter 869. Half a day later, Han Li put away the hidden fortune mansion and flew off to the mainland in a streak of light. He rapidly reached land after a few undisturbed weeks. He didn't revisit the Heavenly Talisman Sect and instead rushed to Nanjiao, the southern border. He intermittently stopped throughout the journey to refine the portion of the Triflame fan that required human flames. Han Li was gloomy that he wasn't able to encounter a thunderstorm along the way. He wasn't worried, rather the opposite. The dense jungles of the southern border had a rainy climate with lightning often mixed in. It would only be a matter of time before he could refine the heaven flame. 4 months had passed before Han Li arrived at the Nanjiang region, having to go through multiple provinces along the way. The Nanjiang region is a name that literally translates to the southern border. Not only is this territory on the southern border, but its name literally translates to this as well. The region was one of the few places that weren't under the rule of a large sect. Rather, the region's resources were split up between a dozen or so mid-grade sects. Although there would commonly be strife in between these sects, if an external power were to invade, they would immediately unite. Even the great 10 righteous and devilish sects haven't been able to subject the territory under their rule, assuming an almost independent position in the Jin Empire. Under such conditions, these sects were distrusting of outsiders and cultivated closely related techniques that were born of themselves. They mostly cultivated rare yin poison techniques that were rarely seen. Not only were they skilled in using poison and insects, their skills in curses had reached perfection. If one fought with a Nanjiang cultivator, a single moment of carelessness would result in a vicious, unblockable blow. The Kaiyun Prefecture was placed west in Nanjiao, with Twin Scorpion Mountain located in one of its desolate mountain ranges. It was covered in miasma hundreds of kilometers wide year-long. Unless one had high enough cultivation or took medicine for the miasma, they would be unable to enter. The mountain range was actually somewhat famous in Nanjiao. As a result of its miasma, the mountain grew many valuable poisonous plants and is the home to 2 types of venomous scorpions that were ideal for low-grade cultivators using insect techniques. When Han Li arrived near this mountain, it was during the yearly eruption of miasma. Many cultivators were gathered nearby as the 2 breeds of venomous scorpions would emerge from their burrows during this time. However, a majority of these cultivators were at chi condensation stage, with a few foundation establishment cultivators mixed in. Since the mountain range was of little interest to high-grade cultivators, not even a single core formation cultivator was present. If a mid-nascent soul eccentric like Han Li was discovered in the area, it would be cause for a great commotion. As such, he hadn't stayed in the mountain surroundings and instead flew into the dense, pink miasma. The azure light protecting his body easily blocked it and the venomous insects that lurked inside. After making sure of his bearings, he directly made his way to the heart of the mountain. Although Elder Wei had originally mentioned the name of the Twin Scorpion Mountain, he hadn't given a specific point. As such, Han Li decided to visit the main peak first. While he flew and pondered about the purpose behind Elder Wei's request, he suddenly heard a miserable scream from far away. "It's a Scorpion King, an Iron Tail Scorpion variant. Everyone run!" A horseman's voice shouted out in terror, followed by the nearby sounds of explosions and a strange insect's cry. Han Li glanced in their direction, with blue light flickering from his eyes. With sounds of tearing wind, a group of men and women began to appear within the miasma as they rushed in his direction. They were running with pointed feet and were sweeping across the ground in a clear display of body lightning techniques. One of the women in the group caused Han Li to suddenly yelp in surprise when he saw her. Soon after, he swept his sleeve and an azure mist spread out, clearing the miasma in the area, clearing an area of 100 meters. The group came to a sudden stop when they entered the clearing. Before they could react, Han Li pointed to the area behind them and made a fist. A hand of azure light appeared and captured something black in its grasp. Then, it flew in a circle and returned to Han Li. The hand held a foot-long scorpion with a shiny jet-black shell. Its half-foot-long tail was barbed and glowed with a purple light. This was the iron-tail scorpion variant that was pursuing these low-grade cultivators. The scorpion was only a grade 2 spirit beast and was firmly confined by the hand of light, only capable of snarling in its capture. These cultivators were all dumbstruck when they saw Han Li in the air and were at a complete loss. The light around him scattered and he asked one of the women, "I didn't think I'd see fellow Taoist Wang here after I left the Jin capital. Is young Miss Cao doing well?" "It's fellow No, Senior Han. Junior Marshal Sister Cao is still in the Jin capital. I've only come here with a few comrades in search of spirit medicines." Lady Wang hurriedly took the initiative to respectfully salute him. Ever since Han Li took off after he was attracted by the sword cry, she had come to realize Han Li's identity as a high-grade cultivator and didn't dare to act casually with him. When the others saw that Lady Wang recognized this great cultivator, they felt relieved and all stepped forward and saluted Han Li in thanks. However, they all believed Han Li to be at core formation stage, as nascent soul cultivators were far beyond the possibility of contact. Han Li nodded in acknowledgement and then turned to look at the confined scorpion with a frown. "As the niece of the South Pillar General, you shouldn't need to brave the risk of looking for spiritual herbs." Lady Wang's expression blanked and then she wryly smiled. "Although my clan is rich and has provided me with a few spirit stones, my aptitude is only average. How could they possibly afford so many spirit stones on me?" In truth, your aptitude is quite good. Foundation establishment stage isn't out of reach for you. Since we had the fate to meet again, I'll hand this over to you. I have business to attend to soon. Take care of yourselves." After that was said, Han Li casually pointed to the hand of light. With a soft bang, the hand scattered into specks of light, and the large scorpion trembled before falling to the ground, completely immobile. "Senior I." Just as Lady Wang was about to utter words of thanks, Han Li disappeared in a flash, and her words came to a sudden stop. The other cultivators looked at the large scorpion variant with envy. However, since the scorpion was something a high-grade cultivator had given her, none of them dared to rob her. They could only watch as the woman stuck several talismans on it and happily placed it in her spirit beast pouch. Moments later, an explosion sounded out, and the miasma covering the sky began to coil. Then, a furious wind scattered some of the miasma to reveal a black storm cloud floating in the air. At that moment, Han Li glanced at the black mountain in the distance and muttered, "The time has finally come." He then flew towards the mountain in a streak. Rolls of thunder sounded out, and heavy rain pelted the surrounding miasma, causing it to shrink down to several meters off the ground. On the mountain in the distance, a storm began to reveal itself. Han Li descended onto a large boulder on the mountaintop, remaining dry with the aid of a barrier of light surrounding him. However, there were 8 cultivators already gathered, 2 at Foundation Establishment and the rest at Qi Condensation. The group all had their hair wrapped in a bun and wore native outfits. When they saw Han Li appear, they all looked at each other in dismay. Han Li swept his gaze at the cultivators and released a flood of astonishing spiritual qi. After waving his arm at the cultivators, he coldly shouted, "Get lost!" As wind wildly blew around him, a mist of azure mist surged. In their alarm, a few of the cultivators released protective barriers and hastily flew off on their magic tools. However, all of them were engulfed by azure mist and flung 100 meters away. This made for a sorry sight as they wore faces of terror. At that moment, they wordlessly rushed off the mountain now that they knew Han Li was a high-grade cultivator. As Han Li watched them disappear from the mountaintop, he expressionlessly turned his gaze to the sky. Lightning roared and danced in the black clouds above him. The green-robed woman Han Li spoke to was Cao Mengrong's senior martial sister Wang, who he had earlier met on his way to the Jin capital. After his outburst, Han Li felt the last trace of distress from monarch's soul divergences passing dissolve. In any case, since he planned on gathering the storm's lightning, he didn't want any interruptions. With a long sigh, he slapped his storage pouch and took out various colored spell flags, sending them off in every direction with the wave of his hand, burrowing into the ground without a trace. He looked at the unceasing lightning in the sky, and the corner of his mouth twitched. His body glowed with light as he floated 100 meters in the air. Forming a strange hand gesture, he began to mutter an incantation. Suddenly, various colored light flashed from down below. Muffled pops sounded out, followed by several pillars of luminescence emerging to the sky and forming huge spell flags. They stood off the ground and remained completely motionless. Continuing his incantations, the spell flags beneath him began to release threads of spiritual chi and slowly took the form of a 30-meter-wide spirit gathering spell formation. Within the brilliant glow, talisman characters began to rise from the center, fully activating it. In that instant, the lightning flashing in the distant skies were suddenly attracted towards the formation and gradually grew closer as the sounds of thunder quickened. Han Li narrowed his eyes and ceased casting incantations. He flipped his hand and summoned a slender jade bottle, a magic tool he had specifically refined to capture the lightning. He released it into the air and struck it with an azure spell seal, causing it to quickly spin several times before it held still in the air. At that moment, Han Li clapped his hands and raised them, releasing 2 dense bolts of golden lightning, both simultaneously striking the bottom of the jade bottle. In a clap of thunder, the bottle trembled and completely absorbed the lightning. With a murmur, Han Li pointed at the air. Crackles sounded out as lightning arced from the bottle and formed a flickering 10-meter-tall pole pointing up into the dark sky. Silver lightning split the sky and struck the golden pole before it was dragged into the bottle. This happened in great succession, as more and more silver bolts struck down and was easily collected. 2 hours later, the bottle gathered another dense bolt and began to release the sounds of a rumbling storm. When he heard this, he inwardly rejoiced. He raised his arm and reached out for the bottle, causing the golden pole to disappear and summoning the jade bottle into his hand. He then flung his sleeve into the sky and produced another bottle of a similar appearance, repeating the process all over again. With that done, he began to carefully examine the bottle that he recovered. It rumbled and trembled without end, flashing dazzling silver light from its mouth as if it could rupture at any moment. Han Li slapped a golden talisman onto it, and the bottle's activity came to a sudden halt. After properly placing the lid and putting it away, he turned his attention to the sky once more. Half a day later, Han Li collected his 4th bottle, but the thunderstorm showed no signs of stopping. Rather, the rain only grew heavier. He pondered to himself before putting away his 4th bottle. He believed he nearly collected enough lightning to create the heavenly flame he needed for the Triflame fan's materials. But his expression stirred solemn, and he suddenly turned to a corner of the sky. He faintly saw a flash, followed by the appearance of a white streak. He knew that with the shining spell formation beneath him and the bolts of lightning wildly dancing above him, his position was extremely noticeable. The white streak hurriedly shot in Han Li's direction. It stopped 100 meters away, and the light disappeared to reveal a woman in palace robes. She had a slender stature and a dainty appearance with a pair of vivid eyes, seeming to be a beauty in the prime of her youth. Her robes were made of some sort of rare material that not only shined with silver light, but also glowed dazzlingly. Han Li swept his spiritual sense past her, and discovered that this woman was a mid-nascent soul cultivator much like himself. She looked at him and sweetly smiled. She said with a soft, pleasant voice, "I am North Night Island's Bai Yai. Are you also here on business with fellow Taoist Fu?" Han Li's heart trembled and he astoundingly asked, "Are you a cultivator from the North Night Palace?" Bai Yai chuckled, "I am the North Night Palace's external affairs elder. Since we are located in a remote area, I am surprised that you know of it. May I ask for your esteemed name?" Han Li calmed down and answered, "My surname is Han, a vagrant cultivator from overseas. I have indeed come to meet with fellow Taoist Fu, though I have long heard of your palace's resounding reputation." Bai Yai stole an interested glance at Han Li and asked, "Oh, does fellow Taoist Han know or have a relationship with any of the 3 great overseas immortals?" "I've never met them, as I'm not someone who often deal with others. I normally cultivate in seclusion on my island." So it was like that, I've been presumptuous. Does fellow Taoist need any assistance in collecting lightning? Many thanks for the offer, but I am about done. This will be the last bottle. When Bai Yai heard him, she flew a circle in the air and landed on another rock. Ah, then I will go ahead and rest as we wait. She raised her hand and summoned an umbrella magic tool up into the sky. It swirled in the air before releasing a cloud of white light down below, blocking any rain from approaching her. Then, she calmly sat down and summoned a palm-sized object into her hand in a flash of cold light. Hanli narrowed his eyes and immediately glanced at the item. It was as white as fresh snow and shined with sparkling glamour. Ice Jade, he immediately recognized. The same myriad-year ice jade from the bottle, the glacial quintessence he acquired. Using the plate of ice jade in her hands, she closed her eyes and sank deep into meditation. It appeared that the woman's cultivation art wasn't purely an ice attribute, but rather that of glacial yin, else she wouldn't have needed to draw on the support of the jade's glacial power. This would produce a somewhat similar result to Han Li's snow soul pills, but it couldn't possibly compare to the effectiveness, no matter the quality of the jade. Though Han Li's expression remained calm, he unconsciously grew wary of the woman. Given how the North Night Palace would rather fight to the death against high-grade demon beasts every several generations than hand over some of their glacial quintessence, it was clear to see how much they valued it. If he allowed this woman to know he had her sect's signature treasure on hand, it would certainly be troublesome. Not long after, he put away his fifth bottle full of lightning and slowly floated to the center of the spirit-gathering spell formation. Then, after striking it with several spell seals, it formed an azure barrier around him, blocking the storm from disturbing him. Then he took a seat with his eyes closed. Of course, he couldn't refine any of the Triflame fan's materials in this woman's presence. Soon, only the sounds of thunder and wind could be heard. After an entire day, the rain finally began to slowly go away, and the scorching sun appeared in the sky. The weather immediately became hot and humid as miasma slowly restored its domain, enveloping the entire range once more. In addition, the many insects that had taken refuge had again emerged from the ground. With great calm, Han Li slowly released his spiritual sense to a 10-kilometer range. Able to sense everything from the trees to the smallest insect all clearly in his mind, he sank into tranquil meditation. Whenever low-grade cultivators made their way up the mountain, they would immediately flee with terror after discovering the astonishing cultivation of the two nascent soul cultivators. As for Han Li and the palace-robed woman, they remained seated for 3 entire days. On the morning of the 4th day, another high-grade cultivator eventually arrived on the main mountain. This time, it was a man with a towering stature. He had a grotesque appearance and dark, shiny skin. From the result of some unknown technique, he left behind an evil wind in his tracks as he flew here on a large tortoise shell. When this large man saw them both, he heartily laughed and found another boulder to sit on. However, he had no intention of meditating. Instead, he took out a sparkling golden book and began to read it. His scholarly actions made for a drastic contrast with his appearance. Although they had turned a blind eye to his actions, Han Li was in truth inwardly frowning. This towering man was also at mid-nascent soul stage. It appeared that Old Man Fu's objective would be unordinary to gather so many cultivators at their level.